A sound like a sudden thunderclap exploded in my ear. I jolted awake, my head snapping up from the school desk. Sweat poured down my face, and my eyes were wide with a lingering terror I couldn't quite explain. I looked around at the familiar faces of my classmates and then at the middle-aged woman standing at the podium. My fear turned into complete confusion. "There are less than 100 days until the college entrance exams," the teacher said, her voice sharp and full of disappointment. "I usually don't bother with you, Chin-shun, but from now on, no one is allowed to sleep in my class." I didn't hear a word she said. My mind was reeling. After a long moment of dazed silence, the reality hit me. I had transmigrated. This was a parallel world. The people around me were the same classmates I knew from my previous life, and the woman at the front was still my class teacher. But the world itself had changed. Technology was no longer the focus here. 300 years ago, the world underwent a massive cataclysm. Horrifying monsters appeared, and the high-tech weapons humanity took such pride in became useless against them. Under the threat of extinction, humans evolved. Some developed a high sensitivity to the elements of heaven and earth. That was how the era of martial artists began. In this world, being a martial artist meant everything. It meant respect, endless wealth, and absolute power. There were 9 ranks, from 1 star to 9 star. But to become one, you needed 2 things: innate talent and the completion of the body refining stage. I searched my new memories and felt a pang of despair. I had no talent. My sensitivity to the fire element was only 0.9. You needed at least a 1.0 to even begin cultivation. I was stuck just 0.1 away from being someone. Suddenly, a crisp sound rang in my head. Ding. Host detected. God-level martial artist system activating. Ding. Activation successful. System panel generated. Just do your best. The teacher sighed, shaking her head when she saw I was still staring blankly into space. She gave up on me and went back to the lesson. My seatmate, a chubby guy named Wang Hai, leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" "I'm fine," I muttered, shaking my head. Wang Hai saw I wasn't hurt and went back to playing on his phone. I focused on the glowing screen in my mind. Name, Chin-shun. Fire sensitivity, 0.9. Combat power, 5. Ding. System detects host has not reached cultivation threshold. Beginner gift pack awarded. Do you wish to forfeit? I stared at the prompt, stunned. Forfeit? What kind of system asks if you want to throw away the prize? If I hadn't been paying attention, I might have accidentally said yes. I want to use it, I thought urgently. I was nervous. If this gift pack couldn't fix my talent, I was finished. Ordinary people lived miserable lives in this world. Ding. Congratulations. Host has received 1 fire sensitivity enhancement pill. A fiery red pill appeared in my system storage. With a single thought, it manifested in my hand. I didn't hesitate for a second. I popped it into my mouth. It melted instantly, sending a wave of warmth through my veins, reshaping my body. I could feel my connection to the fire in the air sharpening, growing stronger by the second. Ding. Fire sensitivity increased to 9. Fire element talent upgraded to SSS-GRADE. I scrambled to open the panel again. Name, Chin-shun. Fire talent, SSS. Combat power, 5. I almost shouted for joy. This was a massive leap. I had gone from trash to a peerless genius in an instant. Talent was ranked from F to SSS, and the higher the grade, the faster the cultivation. I immediately tried to circulate my elemental meditation technique. The speed at which I could sense the energy was staggering. Ding. Congratulations. Host has obtained the talent skill, Devour. Ding. Congratulations. Host has received 1 wind sensitivity enhancement pill. There was more? I was shocked. Usually, talent skills only awakened after becoming a 1-star martial artist. I had never heard of anyone awakening a skill during the body refining stage. I checked the description for Devour. It allowed me to consume energy-rich objects and convert them into my own power. The first thing I thought of was monster essences. Martial artists usually harvested these from beasts to craft weapons, but everyone knew you couldn't eat them. Human and beast energies were incompatible. Consuming one would ruin your cultivation. I pushed the thought aside for now. I'd figure it out later. I waited until no one was looking and swallowed the wind enhancement pill. That familiar warmth returned. Ding. Wind sensitivity increased to 7. Wind element talent upgraded to S-grade. Only S-grade? I frowned. The host's original wind sensitivity was only 0.7, the system explained. Therefore, it can only reach S-grade for now. The host can improve this later through other means. I nodded to myself. S-grade was still incredible. In my memory, S-grade geniuses were 1 in a million. When school ended, I didn't waste a second. I bolted out of the classroom. Chin Chun. Wait up. Wang Hai caught up to me, throwing an arm over my shoulder. I know a great hot pot place. My treat. Let's go grab a drink. Not today. I have to get home, I said, shaking my head. Wang Hai was one of my few friends. We used to drink together because we both felt hopeless. Him because he was rich and lazy, and me because I was a failure. But things were different now. I had the system. I had to grow strong, fast. Half an hour later, I pushed open the door to my home. My father, Qin Dei, was sitting on the sofa watching TV. My mother, Li Xiaofan, was coming out of the kitchen with a bowl of freshly brewed medicine. Xiaoqin, you're back? Mom looked surprised. Are you hungry? I'll cook for you. Don't worry about it, Mom, I said. I looked over at my father. A year ago, he had been injured, and our family had been struggling ever since. Seeing them like this only made me more determined to master my new powers. My father's condition required expensive medicine every 3 days just to keep him stable. Even with the treatment, his health was fading fast. He looked at the bowl of medicine and shook his head. He told my mother to stop wasting money on him. He felt like a burden, watching the family struggle just to keep him breathing. My mother, Li Xiaofan, snapped at him immediately. She asked him if he expected her to just sit there and watch him die. My father sighed, muttering that death would be a relief. My mother's eyes flashed with anger. She told him that if he wanted to die, he should go find the Zhao family first and make them pay. I watched them argue and felt a wave of helplessness. I shook my head and headed toward my room. But as I walked in, my eyes caught the calendar on the wall. I froze. March 18th. The date hit me like a physical blow. In my past life, I died on March 25th. Even though this world was different, the people and the flow of events were nearly identical. That meant I had exactly 7 days left to live. My death hadn't been an accident. I was murdered. In my previous life, my father had also been targeted. He was struck by a car while walking home from work. The driver was Zhao Quan, a wealthy young master from the prominent Zhao family in Rome City. In this life, the details were slightly different, but the villain remained the same. My father had been a soldier on the front lines. During a brutal battle with monsters, his captain was killed. That captain had no family and treated my father like a brother. Before he died, he gave my father his most precious possession, a high-grade beast core from a peak-level ferocious beast. In this world, creatures were divided into ferocious beasts and demonic beasts. A peak-level ferocious beast core was a rare treasure, something even powerful cultivators craved. That core put a target on my father's back. Zhao Quan wanted it. He offered to buy it for 1/10 of its actual market value. It was a joke, a legalized form of robbery. My father refused. The core meant more to him than money. He wouldn't have sold it for 10 times the market price, let alone a fraction. That refusal offended Zhao Quan. Shortly after, my father was accidentally hit by a car. There was no evidence, but I knew the truth. In my past life, Zhao Quan had eventually admitted it to my face before he killed me. I looked at the calendar again. 7 days. I couldn't just hope things would change because I had traveled back in time. I had to take control. I needed to survive the 25th, and I needed to get revenge for my father. But more than that, I had to protect my family. Even if I grew strong enough to protect myself, I couldn't guarantee Zhao Quan wouldn't target my parents out of spite. There was only one way to make the Zhao family back off. I had to become a martial artist. In this world, even a rank 1 martial artist held the status of nobility. They were the shield of humanity. If a martial artist's family was harmed, the authorities would launch a massive investigation. Not even a powerful family like the Zhaos would dare to openly provoke someone under the protection of the Martial Arts Association. I walked out of my room. Dad, where's that beast core? I remembered the captain's core was a fire element one. I needed to see if my talent worked on more than just pills. My father blinked, looking confused, but he pointed toward his bedroom. He told me it was in the cabinet. It's not safe there, I said, walking past him. I'll keep it in my room. My mother grumbled behind me, thinking I was just trying to hide it so I could sell it myself. Our finances were tight, and she had suggested selling it many times before. My father just smiled, glad that I was taking an interest in protecting the family's legacy. I grabbed the wooden box from the cabinet and hurried back to my room, locking the door behind me. I opened the lid. A crimson orb lay inside, radiating a faint, warm heat. A notification appeared in my vision. Asterisk ferocious beast core. Fire element. High grade. Consumable. Asterisk. I exhaled in relief. The system confirmed it. I didn't hesitate. I popped the core into my mouth and swallowed. My devour talent kicked in instantly. The core dissolved, sending a rush of intense heat through my veins. My muscles tightened, my bones hardened, and my senses sharpened to a razor edge. Ding! Fire element core devoured. Fire source body tempering reached 60%. I clutched my fists. I had reached the middle stage of body tempering in seconds. Usually, this process required months of meditation and absorbing elemental energy. Even an SSS-GRADE genius would need at least 3 days to reach 60%. I had done it in 3 minutes. Another notification flashed. Asterisk congratulations to the host for entering the path of cultivation. Mission triggered. Asterisk. Asterisk mission 1. Reach the peak of body tempering within 7 days. Reward. Low-grade wind element beast core. Asterisk. Mission 2. Reach the peak of body tempering within 3 days. The system wasn't done yet. It laid out 3 options for my next move, each harder than the last. Mission 1 was the easy path. Reach the peak of body tempering in 7 days. The reward was a low-grade wind core. Mission 2 was the hard path. 3 days for a high-grade wind core. Then there was Mission 3. Hell mode. I had to reach the peak in just 24 hours. The reward was a top-grade wind core and an ice sensitivity pill. I didn't hesitate. I chose Hell mode. It wasn't just about the better rewards. If I took 3 days just to reach the peak, there was no way I'd become a full-fledged martial artist within a week. I needed to move fast. But I had a problem. To hit 100% tempering, I needed another high-grade fire core. Those things cost 50,000 yuan. My family was broke. 5,000 was a stretch for us, let alone 50. Most of our money went toward basic survival. I looked at the mission timer. One day, I could choose the hard mode and take 3 days to find the money, but I wasn't satisfied with that. If I stalled now, my future growth would crawl. I needed a shortcut. I pulled on my jacket and headed for the door. I'm going out for a bit. I called out. My mother, Li Xiaofan, just shook her head at me. My father, Qin Dai, sighed. He felt guilty that he couldn't provide a better life for me, so he never questioned where I went or why I stayed out late. I hopped in a taxi and headed straight for the city center. My destination was the Martial Arts Association. It was the only place to get officially certified. More importantly, the government gave out massive cash rewards to anyone under 18 who showed talent. The lobby was packed with older men, but a female staff member spotted me immediately. She looked at me like I was a winning lottery ticket. "Are you here for certification, sir?" she asked. Her voice was dripping with politeness. I nodded. She checked my ID. When she saw I was 17, her eyes lit up. "This way, please. No need to wait in line." A few guys in the queue started to grumble, but someone hushed them quickly. In this world, geniuses under 18 were royalty. You didn't offend them unless you wanted trouble later. She led me to a testing window and pulled out a specialized instrument. "Just place your hand here and release your elemental energy." I pressed my palm against the cold surface. A single flame icon flickered to life on the screen. Initial stage fire tempering. The staff member beamed. "Congratulations. You qualify for the 20,000 yuan reward. Give me your bank card, and I'll process it right now." 20,000? That wasn't enough. I needed 50. "Wait," I said, stopping her. "I want to try again." She looked confused, but I didn't explain. I closed my eyes and pushed every ounce of heat in my body toward my palm. I stopped holding back. 2 flame icons roared to life on the display. Middle stage. The lobby went dead silent. The envy in the room turned into pure awe. When you're just good, people get jealous. When you're a monster, they get scared. Middle stage, she stammered. For an under 18 middle stage certification, the reward is 50,000 yuan. I smiled. That was exactly what I needed. The money hit my account minutes later. I didn't leave the building. I asked the staff member where I could buy a beast core nearby. She told me the association had its own shop in the next building. It was safer than the black market. No fakes, no scams, just official prices. I walked over and found the high-grade fire core I wanted. The price tag said 50,000. Since you're a certified genius, you get a 20% discount, the clerk told me. 40,000 yuan. I was actually making a profit. I bought it, took the box, and asked for the nearest restroom. I didn't actually need to go. I just needed privacy. I found a quiet corner, opened the box, and tossed the glowing red orb into my mouth. The heat was explosive this time. It felt like my blood was boiling, refining every fiber of my being. My skin turned a deep crimson as the energy settled into my marrow. Ding! Fire core devoured. Body tempering reached 100%. Peak stage. I stood up, feeling the raw power vibrating under my skin. I had reached the peak in less than an hour. Mission accomplished. The Hell mode rewards for my first mission hit my system inventory immediately. I looked at the digital space and saw 2 items, a wind-type beast core and a pill for ice element sensitivity. With a flick of my wrist, the core appeared in my hand. I didn't hesitate. I tossed it into my mouth and swallowed. The system pinged. My body's wind force tempering had reached 45%. Only 45? I realized then that tempering progress was tied to talent. My wind talent was only S rank, 2 full levels below my fire talent. It was slowing me down. Still, it was enough to push me into the middle stage for the wind element. Next, I swallowed the ice sensitivity pill. My sensitivity shot up to level 8, and my ice talent transformed into SS rank. That made 3 elements now. I let out a small smile. I hadn't started training in ice yet, but having the qualification was the hard part. The rest was just a matter of time. I checked my status panel. My fire realm was at the peak stage of body tempering. My wind realm was at the middle stage. My ice realm was still at 0, but my total combat power had hit 150. I was stunned. Most cultivators only had 1 element. Dual element users were 1 in 10,000. As for triple element users, there were no records of such people even existing. A normal peak stage cultivator had a power level of about 100. A middle stage user sat around 25. Combined, I should have been at 125, but I had surpassed that. Dual elements didn't just add up, they multiplied. If I reached the peak stage in wind, and then started training my SS rank ice element, my combat power would rival a 1-star warrior. The threshold for a 1-star warrior was 300. It was actually possible. I glanced at my talent ranks again. Fire at SSS, ice at SS, and wind at S. I needed to get them all to the peak stage. As for breaking through to become a 1-star warrior, I had 7 days. I couldn't rush that. I needed to condense an elemental mark first. Sir, the staff member, a young woman, walked toward me. The exit is this way. I can arrange a car to take you home. No need, I said. What's your name? I'm Wu Fong. You can call me Xiao Fong, she said, her face lighting up. She was clearly happy I had bothered to ask. Xiao Fong, I said, nodding. If someone under 18 certifies for the late stage, what's the reward? And for the peak stage? Late stage is 100,000 yuan, she answered quickly. Peak stage is 200,000. If you come back to certify again before you turn 18, you can claim the extra money. She could tell I wasn't a rich kid and that I needed the cash. She didn't understand why I was obsessed with buying cores, but she didn't pry. Suddenly, a loud announcement boomed across the entire city, broadcast from the sky. Rome City announcement. Zhao Quan has become a 1-star warrior. Reward, 1 million yuan and 1 grade, 2 martial art technique. The announcement repeated over and over. People in the streets stopped and looked up with pure envy. The rewards were good, but the fame was better. To be personally rewarded by the city lord was a massive honor. Zhao Quan. That must be the one from the Zhao family, Xiao Fong whispered in awe. The Zhao family is incredible. First Zhao Liang, now Zhao Quan. And he's only 20 years old. You know the Zhao family? I asked. My voice was cold. Zhao Quan was the man who had ruined my life. I don't know the family personally, but I know the brothers, Xiaofeng said. She had worked at the association for years. 3 years ago, Zhao Yang certified as a 2-star warrior at 23. Zhao Quan certified at the peak stage of body tempering when he was only 19. That's rare in Rong City. His talent must be at least A rank. Take me back to the testing hall, I said. 19 for the peak stage? A rank talent? And they called that a genius? Xiaofeng looked confused, but she followed me back to the lobby. I want to certify again, I told her. Sir, if the certification fails, you still have to pay the fee, she warned. She thought the announcement about Zhao Quan had triggered me. Just bring the machine, I said. The people in the lobby noticed me returning. Whispers broke out immediately. Some laughed, joking that maybe I had broken through in the 10 minutes I was gone. I didn't say a word. I walked up to the machine and pressed my palm against the sensor. The first flame icon roared to life. Then the second. Middle stage again, someone muttered. Then, the third flame ignited. Late stage. The room went quiet. He actually hit the late stage? Did he hide his strength before? I looked at Xiaofeng and smiled. Not finished yet. I focused, drawing every ounce of the fire energy I had refined from the high-grade core. The machine began to hum. A fourth flame icon flickered, then stabilized. Peak stage. Under 18. The silence was absolute. Then, a man in a suit started walking toward me from the back offices. He pushed through the crowd, his hand extended and a warm, eager smile on his face. Hello, sir, he said. I'm Su Hua, the director here. I shook his hand. A director rarely showed his face to the public, let alone acted this polite. Sir, could we speak in private? Su Hua asked. He looked at Xiaofeng and gestured for her to follow. You too, Xiaofeng, since you've been assisting him. He led us toward a private VIP room, treating me with a level of respect I had never experienced before. Once the door closed, Su Hua turned to me, his eyes gleaming with interest. Go brew a cup of tea for Mr. Qin, Su Hua said, turning to his assistant. Xiaofeng didn't hesitate. She hurried off to get started. I gave a small smile and looked at the director. Director Su, there's no need to call me Mr. I said. It felt a bit awkward. I was still just a high school student, and I could tell the man standing in front of me was already a seasoned martial artist. Su Hua laughed, waving his hand dismissively. All right then, I'll call you Brother Qin. I brought you back here for a simple reason. You just completed a series of back-to-back certifications. That qualifies you for a 300,000 yuan bonus. He paused to let the number sink in. It's not a small amount, so I need to process it manually. It'll only take a few minutes. Xiaofeng returned just then and placed a steaming cup of tea in front of me. She glanced at Su Hua, looking surprised. Usually, there was a standard process for payouts. Even for a sum like 300,000, a director didn't need to handle it personally. Su Hua caught her look and gave her a subtle glance. He didn't have to do this, of course. But a genius like me was worth his personal attention. He wanted to make a connection. I appreciate the help, Director Su, I said, nodding. The amount caught me off guard. It seemed they had stacked the rewards for the late stage and peak stage certifications together. Su Hua smiled and tapped away at his computer. A moment later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification confirmed the transfer. So, Brother Qin, Su Hua asked casually. You're still in your 3rd year of high school, right? Yes, I replied. Rongqing First High. First High, Su Hua beamed. What a coincidence. We're alumni. I graduated from there as well. We chatted for a few minutes about the school. Then, a thought crossed my mind. Director Su, I started. If someone comes in for certification and they happen to be a dual element user, is there an extra reward for that? The room went dead silent. Su Hua froze. Beside him, Xiaofeng's entire body stiffened as she stared at me. She was starting to recognize my patterns. Usually, when I asked a question like that, it meant I was talking about myself. Su Hua eventually shook his head. There's no official rule for extra rewards. Being a dual element user is rare, but it's incredibly difficult to train. It requires double the time and effort. Most people are actually advised against it. He explained that because you have to sense 2 different elements, your cultivation speed drops significantly. The government usually suggests focusing on one element until you hit a bottleneck before even touching the second one. That was why there was no incentive program for it. Brother Chin, Suhua asked, his voice trailing off in shock. Are you a dual-element user? I didn't answer. I just took a slow sip of my tea. If there was no money in it, there was no point in showing my hand. Keeping it hidden would give me a trump card when I eventually had to deal with the Zhao family. Suhua watched me, unable to tell if I was joking or not. He didn't push it, though. He spent the next half hour finding common topics to talk about until I finally stood up to leave. Director Su, I said seriously, please don't spread the word about my certification today. I understand, he replied. The people in the lobby saw you, but they don't know who you are. Any rumors will stay local. However, your data has been uploaded to the system. The high-ranking officials in Rongqing will see it eventually. It's part of your permanent file. That's fine, I said, waving it off. I headed for the exit. Xiao Fong offered to walk me out, but I turned her down. Once I was gone, she couldn't hold it in anymore. Director, he's the biggest genius I've ever seen, she whispered. Compared to him, Zhao Quan is nothing. Suhua nodded. He felt the same way. A peak stage body refiner under 18 was unheard of in Rongqing. Keep that to yourself, he warned. I know, Xiao Fong said. But I think he has a grudge against Zhao Quan. What makes you say that? Suhua asked, surprised. He knew the Zhao family. They were powerful, and even he didn't want to offend them. He didn't recognize my name, and looking at my clothes, I didn't seem like I came from a wealthy background. He was about to leave after buying his equipment, Xiao Fong explained. But as soon as that citywide announcement about Zhao Quan played, his whole mood changed. He came back to certify immediately. I think he only did it because he didn't want to lose to him. He seems like a low-profile person, but Zhao Quan triggered him. She was overthinking it, of course. My main motivation was the money. But Su Hua's eyes flashed with interest. A grudge with the Zhaos? He mused. If that was true, it was a risk worth taking. Xiao Fong, find someone to investigate the history between the two of them. Get every detail you can. And keep it quiet. By the time I left the Martial Arts Association, the sun was setting. I caught a cab and headed home. When I walked through the door, I saw my father, Qin Dai, and my mother, Li Xiufan, sitting on the sofa. They looked like they had been waiting for me. Xiao Chun, we need to talk to you about something, my mother said. I sat down, waiting for the lecture. The beast core, she continued. Where did you put it? We've decided to sell it. A top-grade core should fetch about 80,000 yuan. We can use that to buy you supplements. Maybe you can reach the cultivation threshold before the college entrance exams. They had tried to do this behind my back to surprise me, but they had only found an empty box in my room. I looked at my father. I thought you were dead set against selling it, I said. My father sighed, looking defeated. I was stubborn. I wasn't thinking about the family. My captain told me to sell it the day he gave it to me, but I couldn't get past the guilt. I see things clearly now, though. This past year has been too hard on us. He knew my fire sensitivity was at 0.9. He hoped that with enough expensive supplements, I could bridge that 0.1 gap. If I could just gain the qualification to cultivate, I could get into a university. Even a bottom-tier school would guarantee me a decent life. We aren't selling it, I said, waving my hand. I couldn't sell what I had already swallowed. They looked at me, confused. Usually, I stayed neutral when they argued about the core. This sudden refusal was new. It's impossible to sell, I told them. And you don't need to worry about me anymore. I can already cultivate. I decided it was time to stop hiding it. They had suffered enough stress over the past year. It was time to give them some good news. You can cultivate? My mother stammered. She stood up and reached out to feel my forehead, checking for a fever. I knew they wouldn't believe me just based on my word. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the certification folder. Take a look for yourselves, I said. My mother grabbed the certificate, her hands trembling. The folder in my mother's hands was the official body refining initial stage certification. Her fingers shook as she traced the gold lettering. Let me see. Let me see, my father shouted from the sofa. His legs made it hard for him to move quickly, so he could only lean forward, his eyes wide with desperation and hope. My mother hurried over and handed it to him. As he looked at the document, his face became a mask of complex emotions, disbelief, joy, and a deep, lingering sadness. It's real, he whispered, his voice cracking. Body refining initial stage. It's really real. With the college entrance exams only 3 months away, reaching this level was something only the elite students achieved. Most regular students didn't hit this milestone until they were actually in university. My parents looked at me like I was a stranger, or perhaps a miracle. I just smiled. I actually had 4 certificates in my pocket, including the one for the peak stage. I decided right then to keep the others hidden. If they were this shaken by the lowest rank, the truth about me being at the peak would probably make them faint. I stood up and headed to my room, leaving them to process the shock in peace. The next morning, the atmosphere at school was tense. Our homeroom teacher stood at the podium, his eyes scanning the class with a sharp, serious intensity. "Today, we're heading to the combat arena for practical training," he announced. "This is a test of your progress. The college entrance exams are looming, and the school will be using these results to scout 4 seeds, students who show exceptional talent. Those students will receive special training and resources." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. How many elite students a school produces isn't just your problem. It's the school's reputation on the line. "Now move. Everyone to the arena. Don't embarrass me." The walk took less than 20 minutes. When I arrived, the field was already packed with over 1,000 students. We were divided into 10 groups. My class, Class 7, was placed in Group 2. A burly man stepped forward to face us. "I am Fong Lei. I'll be your instructor today. Now, who wants to be first?" "Teacher, are we fighting you?" someone called out. Fong Lei chuckled, a predatory glint in his eyes. "I'm at the peak stage of body refining. If you want to test your luck against me, step right up." The crowd went silent. Even the top genius of high school #1 wasn't at the peak stage yet. Stepping up first meant acting as the king of the hill, taking on whoever came next. Nobody wanted that target on their back. "What? No courage?" Fong Lei challenged. Finally, a student stepped out. He moved with a confidence that most lacked. "I'll go." Liao Yang. A ripple of whispers broke out. Liao Yang was ranked 5th among the 10 great geniuses of our school. People in my group groaned. If he was the benchmark, the rest of us were just going to be punching bags. Fong Lei nodded, satisfied. He looked around, but since no one else volunteered to face a top 5 genius, he started pointing people out. He needed to record everyone's combat ability, even if it meant a one-sided beating. "You, step up," Fong Lei pointed. The student's face turned pale. He walked up, trembling, and was sent flying by Liao Yang before he could even blink. One by one, students went up and were systematically dismantled. Even the strongest among them couldn't last more than 3 moves. "Class monitor, go for it," someone from my class yelled. Our class monitor stepped up with a bitter smile. He managed to endure 10 moves before Liao Yang swept his legs out from under him. The morale of Class 7 plummeted. Liao Yang was just too dominant. The girls in the crowd were watching him with sparkling eyes, clearly impressed by his strength. Fong Lei nodded. "Not bad. Liao Yang has clearly touched the threshold of the initial stage." His finger moved again, scanning the remaining students. Then, it stopped on me. "You, come out." I stood up. Beside me, my friend Wang Hai grabbed my sleeve. "Just fall down as soon as you get hit," he hissed. "Don't let him break your ribs." I gave him a small nod and walked into the center of the ring. My expression was flat, completely calm. The other students whispered, wondering if I was brave or just too stupid to be scared. Liao Yang looked bored. He had beaten so many people that he didn't even see me as a challenge. "Ready?" he asked dismissively. "Ready," I replied. The moment the word left my lips, Liao Yang exploded forward like a cheetah. He wanted to end this boring fight instantly. He was a blur of motion, closing the gap in a heartbeat. The girls in the crowd started screaming his name. Boom. A figure went flying backward, trailing a cloud of dust. "Liao Yang! Liao Yang!" The girls continued to cheer, their voices reaching a fever pitch. Then, they saw who was lying on the ground. The cheering stopped instantly. It was like someone had shoved a handful of dirt into their mouths. The entire arena fell into a deathly silence. Liao Yang, the 5th-ranked genius, was sprawled on the turf, face pale, gasping in agony. I was still standing in the exact same spot where I started. I hadn't even moved a single step. "Qin Chun! Qin Chun!" Wang Hai was the first to snap out of it, screaming my name at the top of his lungs. Soon, all of Class 7 joined in. Fong Lei's pupils dilated. Even he hadn't been able to clearly see my movement or gauge my true realm in that split second. Quick, 2 people, get him to the infirmary. Fong Lei shouted, seeing Liao Yang's condition worsening. As they carried the genius away, I looked at Fong Lei. I felt a little awkward. Sorry, teacher, I said. It was my first time really fighting. I didn't know how to hold back. Fong Lei opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. Teacher, call the next one up. I promise I'll be more careful this time. The students nearby looked like they had seen a ghost. Call the next one. I had just one-shot their 5th best fighter. Who would be stupid enough to step up now? Fong Lei stared at me for a long moment. Next one my ass, he muttered. There's no point. Qin, come with me. He turned to the rest of the group. The rest of you, practice amongst yourselves. I'll be back. He led me away toward the school's restricted training building, leaving a sea of stunned faces behind. As soon as we were out of earshot, the crowd erupted. What level is he? He has to be at the middle stage. Only Wang Chong from Class 1 reached the middle stage recently. Qin has been hiding this the whole time? What a snake. Back in the crowd, Wang Hai was surrounded by classmates. They knew he was my best friend and were dying for info. Haha, I knew it all along. Wang Hai bragged, though his own heart was actually racing with shock. Let me tell you, he's not at the middle stage. He's at the late stage. The late stage. The collective gasp sounded like a vacuum. Everyone watched my retreating back with a mixture of awe and terror. I was no longer just another student. I was a monster they hadn't seen coming. Fong Lei led me deep into the restricted training building, a place usually reserved for the elite or for official testing. He stopped in front of a combat strength testing machine and turned to me, his expression dead serious. Qin, what is your actual realm? He asked. Don't hide anything from me. This determines how the school will handle your training during the final push for the college entrance exams. If you lie now, you're only hurting yourself. I looked him in the eye and nodded. Peak stage of body refining. I wasn't about to tell him I had 3 different elemental affinities. That was my trump card. But revealing the peak stage was enough to shake things up. Fong Lei's eyes changed instantly. The skepticism vanished, replaced by pure, raw excitement. I knew it. Peak stage, you really reached the peak. He grabbed my arms, his grip tight. Do you mind testing your combat power? Right now. Teacher, calm down, I said, feeling a bit awkward. Let's do it. I was actually curious myself. I wanted to see if the machine's numbers matched what my system was telling me. Fong Lei was about to start the machine when he suddenly froze. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number frantically. A few minutes later, a man in his 50s hurried into the room, looking annoyed. It was the principal. Fong Lei, what's the emergency? The principal snapped. Why did you drag me down here? Principal, it's a big deal. Fong Lei shouted, his voice cracking with adrenaline. We have a student testing his combat power. You have to see this. The principal looked like he was about to lose his temper. He didn't have time to watch a random student hit a machine. But before he could speak, a massive boom echoed through the hall. I had thrown a punch. The numbers on the display blurred as they climbed rapidly, flickering like a broken clock before finally slamming to a halt. 150. The principal's jaw dropped. Even Fong Lei, who already knew I was at the peak stage, stared at the screen in total disbelief. A normal peak stage cultivator might break 100 if they were naturally gifted, but 150 was unheard of. It was physically impossible for someone at this level. Fong Lei, which school is he from? The principal demanded, his voice booming. He looked at me, searching his memory, but couldn't place my face. He knew all the top students in the city, and I wasn't one of them. Principal, he's one of ours. Fong Lei said, sounding slightly offended. He's from Class 7. Why would I bring a kid from another school here? The principal blinked, finally processing the situation. He looked at me again, and this time, his eyes were full of warmth and approval. He walked over and pulled me to a seat. Student Qin, tell me, he said softly, are you a dual element user? A combat score of 150 meant only 2 things. Either I was a freak of nature with a monstrous physique, or I was cultivating 2 elements at once. Looking at my lean frame, he clearly leaned toward the latter. I nodded. I didn't deny it. Dual element users were rare, but they existed. Haha, good. The principal let out a booming laugh. Dual element. That explains it. If your total power is 150, your second element must already be at the middle stage. That speed is incredible. He leaned in closer, his tone becoming protective. Listen to me. The exams are coming. Focus everything on your peak stage element. If you can break through and become a one-star warrior before the exams, you can pick any university in the country. You'll be our school's secret weapon. I understand, I replied. I didn't bother explaining that my situation was even more complex than he thought. Is there anything the school can do for you? He asked. The old training plans for geniuses were useless now. I had already left those kids in the dust. I don't have many requests, I said, shaking my head. But I heard the school has a special scholarship fund. The principal looked at me, surprised by my bluntness. We do, but the maximum amount isn't that high. How much? 100,000. That's perfect, I said. I'd like to apply for it. My family, we're very poor. The principal sighed, looking touched. What a good kid. I'll handle the paperwork myself. I'll try to get it to you in 3 days. That's the fastest the system allows. Thank you, principal. I smiled. With that 100,000, plus what I already had, I'd have over 400,000. That was life-changing money for my parents. Anything else? The principal asked. I want a flexible schedule, I said. My cultivation method is a bit different. Coming to class every day isn't the best use of my time. Done. He agreed without a second thought. He didn't want to mess with whatever I was doing to get these results. I left the school immediately, skipping the rest of the practical combat class. I caught a cab to the city's largest energy mall. It was a government-run hub for beast cores, hides, and medicinal pills. Since it was official, my cultivator discounts would apply here too. I had 32,000 in the bank. I needed to get my wind element to the peak stage and officially start training my weapon element. One top-tier wind beast core had previously boosted my progress to 45%. Since my wind talent was only S-grade, I needed 2 more top-tier cores to hit the peak. At full price, they were 12,000 each, but I had a secret weapon. I walked up to the counter and asked for the price. 12,000 each, sir, the clerk said. Wind cores are rarer than fire, so they cost a bit more. I'll take 2, I said, sliding my peak stage certification across the counter. The clerk's face went pale. My lord, you. Is there a problem? I frowned. No problem, he stammered. It's just, as a peak stage cultivator, you get a 40% discount. I blinked. I remembered getting 20% off at the middle stage. It seemed the higher the rank, the bigger the perk. Wrap them up, I said, grinning. That brought the price down to 7,200 each. I didn't stop there. I went to the weapon element section and bought 2 top-tier cores for that as well. By the time I walked out, I had 3,200 left. I'd keep 200 for myself and give the rest to my parents for household expenses. Once the school's 100,000 hit my account, my family would never have to worry about money again. With the shopping finished, my family's situation was about to change for the better. I turned and headed for the mall exit, feeling the weight of the 4 beast cores in my bag. As I reached the ground floor, 2 people walked through the entrance. A man and a woman. The man froze the moment he saw me. His eyes dropped to the bag in my hand, and his brow furrowed. Young Master Zhao? What's wrong? The woman beside him asked. She was flashy, dripping in expensive jewelry, looking at him with confusion. I see a familiar face, Zhao Quan muttered. He stared at me, his mind clearly racing. I remembered him well. Not long ago, I had confronted him, demanding to know if he was the one who orchestrated the accident that crippled my father. He had admitted it without a hint of remorse. He knew my family was poor. Seeing me walk out of a high-end cultivation mall with a bag full of goods made his expression darken. I could see the gears turning. He probably thought I'd recorded his confession and used it to blackmail his family for money. Zhao Quan was powerful, but he wasn't powerful enough to ignore the law, especially when it involved a retired veteran like my father. In his eyes, I was a ticking time bomb. Who is this guy? Why do you have friends like this? The woman sneered, looking at my plain, cheap clothes with total disgust. I didn't say a word. I just glanced at them and kept walking. Qin Shun, Zhao Quan called out suddenly. His voice was surprisingly warm. It really is you. He stepped forward with a fake, wide grin. Qin Shun, my brother. Last time you came to see me, I was in a terrible mood. I felt bad about it ever since. Do you have a moment? I want to make things right. I'll give you the compensation your family deserves. All of it, right now. I stopped and looked him in the eye. How do you plan on compensating me? His eyes lit up with predatory joy. Come on, let's talk in the car. I smiled. I knew exactly what he was planning, but I didn't refuse. I followed him out to the parking lot. Brother Chin, I don't have that much cash on my card, Zhao Quan said smoothly as he started the engine. But I have a villa in the suburbs. All my money and resources are stored there. We'll take a quick trip, and I'll give you whatever you want. How does that sound? I hesitated, playing the part of the greedy, nervous commoner. Don't worry, Zhao Quan urged. Once we get there, the sky's the limit. I bit my lip, looking conflicted, then finally nodded. Fine, but we have to be back early. Of course. My car is fast. Zhao Quan laughed. Then he turned to the woman, his face turning cold. Get out. She gasped. Young Master Zhao? I want to see the villa too. No one knows about that villa but me, he snapped. We had a deal. If we break up, you get nothing. You don't need to know where it is. The woman looked ready to scream, but I cut in. It's fine, young Master Zhao. Let her come. Two men driving off alone looked strange anyway. Zhao Quan blinked. He clearly wanted to refuse, but he seemed afraid I'd back out if he pushed it. Fine. Get in. He slammed the car into gear and sped toward the outskirts of the city. As the minutes passed, the scenery changed from skyscrapers to trees. The road turned into a desolate dirt path. There wasn't a house or a soul in sight. Finally, the car slowed to a halt. The road ends here, Zhao Quan said, his voice flat. We have to walk the rest of the way. The woman hopped out, oblivious to the danger. I stayed in the back seat for a second and pulled out the 4 beast cores. I didn't hesitate. I swallowed all 4 of them at once. A surge of raw energy exploded in my chest. Asterisk ding. Devouring successful. Wind element tempering, 100%. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. Devouring successful. Ice element tempering, 100%. Asterisk. I stepped out of the car, feeling a level of power I had never imagined. My internal stats updated instantly. Name, Qin Shun. Fire, peak body refining. Wind, peak body refining. Ice, peak body refining. Combat power, 500. I was stunned. I knew that reaching the peak of 3 elements would make me strong, but 500? The threshold for a 1-star martial artist was 300. I had bypassed the limit of a regular human before even officially breaking through. Zhao Quan had only just become a 1-star martial artist. His combat power couldn't be much higher than 300. I looked at his back and smiled. Tremble all you want, Zhao Quan. You have no idea what's coming. Suddenly, a new notification flashed in my vision. God-level mission triggered. Become a 1-star martial artist. Option 1. Within 6 months. Reward. Fire mark fragment. Normal. Option 2. Within 3 months. Reward. Fire and wind mark fragments. Hard. Option 3. Within 1 month. Reward. Fire, ice, and wind fragments plus grade 2 martial art. Hell. Option 4. Within 3 days. Reward. 2 random mark fragments plus God-level martial art gift bag. God level. 3 days? That was insane. But the reward, a God-level gift bag? Ding. 3 seconds to accept. If no choice is made, a random mission will be assigned. 3-2. I'll take option 4. I thought frantically. Brother Chin, keep up. We're almost there. Zhao Quan called out, waving me over. Hurry up, the woman added, her eyes full of loathing. She clearly hated that I was tagging along on her payday. Coming, I replied, my voice calm. We walked a bit further until an abandoned reservoir came into view. It was surrounded by thick, rotting woods. There was nothing there but a crumbling shack once used by a watchman. Young Master Zhao, where's the villa? The woman asked, looking around. Zhao Quan turned suddenly. His hand blurred, snapping out and grabbing her by the throat. The villa, he hissed. This reservoir is a much better grave than any villa. The woman's eyes bulged. She tried to scream, but only a wet gurgle came out. Zhao Quan didn't hesitate. With a sickening crack, he snapped her neck and tossed her body into the dark water like a piece of trash. I watched the whole thing without blinking. I'd encouraged her to come for a reason. She was a witness. If she stayed behind, The Zhao family would track me down in hours. But now she was gone. And soon, Zhao Quan would be too. Even if the Zhao family investigated, it would take time. Time was the one thing I needed most. I stood by the water, watching Zhao Quan. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing in confusion. He expected me to run, to scream, or to beg for my life after witnessing him murder that woman. But I didn't move. I just stood there, expressionless. Scared stiff. Are you? He sneered, walking toward me. Now it's your turn. He didn't waste another second. He lunged, his fist glowing a dull, fiery red. It was a fire element technique, 1-star martial artist level. I didn't flinch. I didn't even try to dodge. As his fist closed in, I felt the energy humming in my own veins. Just as he was about to make contact, I threw my own punch. A massive boom echoed through the woods. Zhao Quan's smug expression shattered. A sickening crack rang out, followed by his agonized scream. He was sent flying backward, his body slamming hard into the dirt. You broke through, he gasped, his face turning ghostly pale. He was terrified. As a 1-star martial artist, his combat power was around 320, but I had just crushed him with a single blow. To him, it was impossible. I had to have been a martial artist for a long time to possess that kind of strength. I didn't give him time to process it. I stepped forward, looming over him, and raised my palm toward his head. Die, I said coldly. No. Stop, he shrieked, realization hitting him. I'm a Zhao? You can't kill me. My family will hunt you down. They'll kill your parents. My hand didn't waver. I slammed my palm down onto his skull. His eyes bulged, filled with a final, lingering horror, before his body went limp. I grabbed his collar, dragged his heavy corpse to the edge of the reservoir, and hurled it into the dark water. I watched the two bodies sink slowly into the depths. Once they disappeared, I didn't stop. I found Zhao Quan's car, drove it straight into the reservoir, and scrubbed the scene of any traces of my presence. It was clean. It was efficient. By the time I walked back home, the sun had already set. I went straight to my room and sat cross-legged on my bed. It was time to cultivate. I held out my hand, and a small flame flickered into existence, dancing across my palm. To truly become a 1-star martial artist, I needed to condense an elemental mark. It was the only way to fully control the raw energy. For a 1-star, that meant forming a single divine rune. My fire element talent was SSS-GRADE. The affinity I felt with the flames was terrifyingly high. I spent the entire night focused, drawing the energy in. By dawn, I opened my eyes and checked the system. Name, Qin Shun. Fire element, body refining peak, mark progress, 2%. Wind element, body refining peak. Ice element, body refining peak. Combat power, 504. At this rate, it would take 50 days to reach 1-star. I shook my head. Even with SSS-GRADE talent, it was too slow. For anyone with a normal grade, it would take years. I knew there were places that could speed this up, elemental cultivation rooms. The Martial Arts Association had them, filled with dense energy, but they were incredibly expensive. A single night could cost hundreds of thousands. To hit my 3-day deadline, I'd need millions, and even then, there was no guarantee. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was the principal. Qin Shun, get to school. Now, he said. Principal, I have the right to study independently. I reminded him. I know, but this is urgent. Just get here. He hung up before I could argue. I headed to the school and walked into the principal's office. The school director was there too, looking at me with a complicated expression. The principal waved me over to a chair, a wide smile on his face. Have you heard of the Genius Training Camp? He asked. I nodded. It was a special program for high school seniors, held every year before the college entrance exams. Each school in the city sent their best student to compete. We've chosen you to represent Rongqing First High, the principal said, his eyes gleaming with hope. There are over 150 schools in this city. Usually, we're lucky to be in the middle of the pack. But with you, I think the top 10 is a guarantee. Maybe even the top 3. The director watched me silently. Usually, students fought tooth and nail for a spot in this camp. Now, the principal was practically begging me to go. When does it start? I asked. Noon today. I frowned. 3 days. I had 3 days to break through, and being stuck in a camp would limit my freedom. Seeing my hesitation, the principal leaned in. Chin-chun, listen. The city gives every participant a $10,000 bonus. You'll get elite coaching. And most importantly, you'll have access to the elemental cultivation rooms. My heart skipped a beat. The camp has cultivation rooms. Of course, he laughed, sensing he'd found my price. And these aren't standard ones. They're newly developed. The cultivation speed inside is 15 times faster than the outside world. 15 times? I was stunned. The best rooms in the capital only offered 13 times the speed. If I could gain 2% in a normal night, 15 times that would be 30%. 2 or 3 nights in there, and my fire element would reach 1 star easily. I'm in, I said firmly. Excellent, the principal roared. And if you take first place in the camp, I'll personally increase your school bonus to 15,000. I'll make it happen, even if I have to pay the difference myself. Thank you, principal. I won't let you down. Money was money, and I wasn't about to turn it down. The principal checked his watch. You need to leave now? Noon is the absolute deadline to check in. The other students have likely already started their journey. Where is it? I asked. The principal shook his head. I don't actually know. Part of the test is finding it yourself. You'll have to figure out the location and get there on your own. I had to reach the training camp before sunset. If I was late, I was disqualified. Simple as that. They really know how to play games, I muttered, turning to leave. Behind me, the principal and the director shared a knowing smile. This wasn't just a test of strength, it was a test of brains. If a student couldn't even find the camp within a day, they didn't deserve to be there. Do you think he can take first place? The director asked suddenly. The principal hesitated. In previous years, someone with Chin-chen's skills would have been a shoo-in. But this year was different. 2 other geniuses had emerged from high school number 7 and number 9. Both were rumored to be at the peak stage of body refining. They were my real competition. I don't know, the principal admitted, shaking his head. But pressure is good. If there was no challenge, I wouldn't have recommended him. He reached this level in secret, so he clearly has his own way of doing things. I walked out of the school gates and stopped. I didn't just start running blindly. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened a map. In Rongqing, there were only 3 places equipped with elemental cultivation rooms: the Martial Arts Association, the Testing Center, and the Mingshan Training Grounds. The training camp had used all 3 locations in the past. They never stayed in one spot. Looking at the map, I frowned. The 3 locations were in completely different directions. If I checked them one by one, I'd run out of time. I zoomed in on the map, marking the location of every high school in the city. Then I smiled. The schools were scattered everywhere. Some were close to the association, others to the testing center. But not a single school was near Mingshan. Even the closest one was a 3-hour trek away. The furthest was 6. If the organizers wanted to be fair to everyone, Mingshan was the logical choice. It was the most isolated spot. Mingshan it is, I decided. From my current position, I was the furthest away. It would take me at least 5 or 6 hours to get there. However, I didn't head for Mingshan immediately. I started walking toward the Martial Arts Association instead. It was only 30 minutes away. Checking it first wouldn't hurt my timeline. Need a ride, kid? A taxi pulled up beside me. The driver leaned out the window, grinning. I hopped into the front seat. Martial Arts Association. You got it. The driver slammed on the gas, and we sped off. He glanced at me, eyes curious. Going there for certification? You're pretty young. Impressive. Something like that. I replied casually. Got a girlfriend? I've got a daughter about your age, he started rambling. I gave him one-word answers, keeping my eyes on the road. But suddenly, my eyes narrowed. Hey, driver. This isn't the way to the association. He'd taken 2 wrong turns while he was talking. We were moving further away from my destination. Relax, kid. I've been driving for 3 years. I know a shortcut when I see one. I didn't argue. I didn't wait. I lifted my leg and kicked the passenger door with everything I had. The metal buckled, and the entire door flew off the hinges, tumbling into the street. I leaped out of the moving car, landing in a perfect roll. The driver's face went pale, but he didn't stop the car. He kept driving. In his rearview mirror, he saw me standing steadily in the middle of the road, completely unbothered. He kicked a door off its frame. The driver whispered, shocked. That's at least middle-stage body refining. This year's crop is better than the last. He picked up a radio. Subject 37 has broken containment. Cultivation level, middle stage at minimum. He's sharp. I watched the taxi disappear, a small smile playing on my lips. The test had already begun. They were trying to lead us astray before we even got to the mountain. I turned around and headed straight for Mingshan. Back in the taxi, the driver pulled over. He was actually an instructor for the training camp. Every student had been assigned a number based on their school rankings. I was number 37, the spot originally held by Wang Chong. The instructor was surprised, not just by my strength, but by my decisiveness. Most kids would have argued or tried to force him to go to the association. I had simply abandoned the goal the moment I realized it was a trap. A few hours later, after catching a real taxi, I stood at the base of Mingshan. The peak was hidden in the clouds. High up on the slopes, two other students, a boy named Zhou Lei and a girl named Jin Xiaoyan, were struggling. This mountain is impossible, Xiaoyan panted, stopping to catch her breath. We aren't even a third of the way up. If we don't make it by dark, we're failures. Zhou Lei looked tired, but he was holding up better. Mingshan is off limits to normal people for a reason. It's a beast. He looked up the trail, then back at her. Xiaoyan, I can't wait for you. It gets harder the higher we go. If I stay, I won't make it either. Xiaoyan's eyes widened in anger. Zhou Lei, you're leaving me? You said you liked me. I do. But this opportunity is too big to lose, he stammered. What are you worried about? She snapped. Our school is the closest to this place. We started first. If we can't make it, no one can. If nobody reaches the top, they'll have to let us in anyway. They were the best in their schools and had a massive head start. In their minds, if the mountain broke them, it would destroy everyone else. They had no idea I was already at the bottom, looking up. If this training camp wasn't here, I'd say we were just unlucky, the girl said, her voice turning sharp and cold. But if you leave me behind now, don't you ever speak to me again. Zhou Lei's expression shifted. He took a deep breath, ready to argue, but then his eyes darted toward the bottom of the slope. His jaw dropped. Xiaoyan, look. Quickly look. Look at what? She snapped, clearly annoyed. Still, she couldn't help herself and turned around. A figure was tearing up the mountain at an unbelievable speed. They had been climbing for an hour just to cover a third of the distance. Yet this person was closing the gap in seconds. Mingshan wasn't a tourist spot with paved paths. It was a rugged wilderness used only for training elites. The ground was a mess of loose rocks and thick mud, yet this person moved as if they were on a flat running track. Trees didn't slow them down. Loose stones that would normally slide under a person's weight didn't even budge. The figure moved like a dragonfly skimming the water. Is that an instructor? Xiaoyan whispered, completely stunned. Zhou Lei looked confused. It was the only explanation that made sense. Only instructors or students were allowed up here. No, it's not an instructor, she cried out. As I got closer, Zhou Lei's face changed. I looked too young. I looked exactly like a student, just like them. How is that possible? Zhou Lei muttered. He has to be at least at the late stage of body refining. I heard there were some freaks in this year's class, but this is insane. I kept my pace steady, the distance between us shrinking rapidly. Hey, classmate, which school are you from? Zhou Lei shouted as I approached. I didn't slow down. I streaked past them like a blur of motion. First hi, I called back. By the time they processed my answer and looked up, I was already 100 meters ahead of them. Holy crap, Zhou Lei cursed. To them, this climb was a grueling struggle. To me, it felt like flying. Wind element, Xiaoyan murmured, watching my back. He has to be a wind element user at the late stage. She was right about the feeling. As I passed them, it felt like a gale had swept by. At the body refining stage, before we learn true martial arts, only those with the wind element can move with that kind of speed. I kept my breathing rhythmic as I climbed. I wasn't just hiking, I was enjoying it. People said this mountain was impossible for normal humans, and I could see why. The air here felt different, thicker, purer. It felt like the legendary spiritual chi was present in every breath. Each lungful felt like a mini-session of cultivation. If I stayed here long-term, my progress would be twice as fast as it was in the city. I glanced back, and those two were the only ones I'd seen so far. It looked like I was in the lead. The higher I went, the steeper the terrain became. The pressure increased, but I didn't slow down. At first, I only used my wind element. When that started to feel heavy, I kicked in my fire element. Finally, near the very top, I unleashed all 3 elements at once. My blood began to boil with power. With one final, explosive step, I cleared the ridge and stood on the summit of Mingshan. I let out a long, slow breath, feeling a wave of refreshment wash over me. That climb was better than a workout. I checked my system and grinned. Just by pushing myself up this mountain, my 3 elemental marks had condensed by another 2%. My fire mark was now at 4%, and my total combat power had jumped to 5,166. I was making progress before the camp had even officially started. I looked ahead, and the top of Mingshan was a massive plateau, so wide I couldn't see the other side. About 200 meters away, I saw a cluster of buildings and a few high-rises. As I walked toward them, 2 men in military uniforms stepped out. One of them checked his watch and then looked up at me, his eyes widening slightly. "Not bad," he said. "First one here, and you made good time." "What school?" "First high," I replied. The 2 men exchanged a look of pure shock. They scanned me from head to toe. "First high? Really?" one asked. "There's no point in lying about that." I shrugged. "I'm from First High. Why would I lie?" "But First High is at least a 5-hour drive from here," the other officer noted. "That means you climbed this mountain in less than 2 hours." I didn't correct them. In reality, I had been dropped off late, and my actual climbing time was less than an hour. "Impressive." "Very impressive," the first man said, regaining his composure. "Welcome to the Genius Training Camp. We're the security detail here." He stepped forward and naturally extended his hand. "What's your name, kid?" "Chin Chun," I said, reaching out to shake his hand. The moment our palms met, my brow furrowed. I felt his grip begin to tighten. It wasn't a friendly squeeze. He was applying real pressure. "Chin Chun, huh? Good name," he said, nodding. He didn't let go. Instead, the force increased. I kept my face expressionless. If he wanted to play, I'd play. I began to push back, matching his strength pound for pound. The man's expression flickered. He clearly didn't expect me to fight back. He gritted his teeth and ramped up the pressure, pushing toward the limit of the body refining stage. I didn't flinch. I wasn't even breathing hard. Beside us, the other officer looked startled. He could tell his partner was using peak body refining strength, yet I looked like I was holding a teacup. Peak stage? I saw the thought flash in their eyes. The man shaking my hand seemed stunned, but then a smirk played on his lips. He thought he had my number. Their job was simple: break the ego of these geniuses the moment they arrived. They wanted us humble. He decided to stop holding back. He shifted his energy, tapping into the power of a 1-star warrior. His combat power surged instantly to 350. The man's smug expression vanished in an instant. Just as he prepared to crush my hand, I reversed the flow. I didn't just resist. I exerted a suction-like force that pulled his palm tight against mine. A bead of sweat broke out on his forehead. I could feel him panic. The pressure I was returning was relentless, making his skin crawl. He couldn't take it anymore. "Student Chin, welcome to the Genius Training Camp," he blurted out, his voice strained. He desperately tried to yank his hand back. I smiled thinly and let go. "Sorry for the trouble," I said calmly. "No trouble. No trouble at all," he laughed, though his voice was trembling. He pointed toward a designated area. "Go over there for now. Once everyone else arrives, we'll assemble. Your instructors are waiting in that direction." "Thanks," I said, walking past them without a backward glance. Once I was out of earshot, the other guard turned to his partner in confusion. He'd seen us looking evenly matched at first, but the ending had baffled him. "What happened?" he asked. "A 1-star warrior," the man gasped, shaking his aching hand. His eyes were wide with lingering fear. "His strength, it's at the level of a 1-star warrior. It might even be higher than mine. That hurt like hell." He looked at his palm. His own combat power was around 350, but he estimated the strength I had just displayed was at least 380. Unless someone had a freakishly mutated physique, a score like that meant I had definitely broken through to the warrior rank. The 2 guards watched my retreating back, their minds racing. An underage 1-star warrior was a rarity even in the long history of Ronqing. "Should we report this?" the second guard whispered. "No," The first one replied, shaking his head. It was just a silent test. We can't be 100% sure he's reached that rank yet. He might be a dual element user instead. If we report it and we're wrong, the boss will have our heads. He doesn't tolerate mistakes. They decided to keep quiet and waited for the next arrivals. I reached the assembly point, which turned out to be a large, open plaza. It looked like a standard training ground, nothing special. I waited. Slowly, more students began to trickle onto the peak. Held out for 5 seconds without screaming. Pass. I heard the guard's voice echo from the entrance. A student would walk toward the plaza, looking shaken. But more often than not, a blood-curdling scream would ring out followed by a cold shout. Failed. Next, people were being disqualified every few minutes. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the flow of successful students slowed to a crawl. Finally, a man in a crisp military uniform marched toward us. He scanned the crowd. Out of the 150 who started, only 72 remained. Well, the man barked. Better than the last batch. From this moment on, anyone who hasn't arrived is officially disqualified. Congratulations. You have entered the Genius Training Camp. I am Ma Jun, one of your instructors. The plaza erupted in whispers. Over half the candidates were gone already. Quiet. Ma Jun roared. Being here doesn't mean you stay here. This camp lasts 2 months. Every day, you will earn points based on your performance. Every single day, the person with the lowest score will be kicked out. The atmosphere turned cold. If they cut 1 person a day, another 60 people would be gone by the end of the camp. Only the strongest would survive. Who arrived first? Ma Jun asked loudly. People looked around, murmuring. I stepped forward from the crowd. Everyone stared, wondering which elite school I represented. Ma Jun looked at his clipboard. Which school? First High, I replied. Ma Jun looked surprised. First High? And you were the first to arrive? Unexpected. The other students began to buzz. First High was one of the furthest schools from this mountain. To get here first was a serious feat of strength. Ma Jun scanned his list for the First High slot. Your name is Wang Chong? I paused. I realized I was still listed under the name of the guy I had replaced. The principal clearly hadn't updated the camp's roster yet. My name is Qin Shun, I corrected him. Ma Jun frowned. Qin Shun, a last-minute swap. He looked annoyed. Usually, last-minute replacements were legacy kids, rich brats who used family connections to cut the line. Yes, I'm the replacement, I said. The mood in the plaza shifted instantly. The word nepotism practically hung in the air. A relation hire? I knew it, someone whispered. He probably had an elder carry him up the mountain. The insults started flying. Only one boy stayed silent, the one I had passed on the trail earlier. He looked at the others like they were idiots. He'd seen my speed. He knew the truth. Shut up, Ma Jun bellowed, silencing the crowd. He crossed out Wang Chong's name and wrote mine. He handed me a numbered badge. Since you're the replacement, you take his ID. You're assigned to Area 4. Go wait by the gate. He pointed to a row of 10 large gates in the distance, each marked with numbers. I headed over, but I didn't let my guard down. This wasn't a place for rest. The camp provided private rooms for cultivation, so these 10 areas had to be for something else. Soon, everyone was lined up at their assigned gates. Ma Jun walked over to us, his face grim. You've spent the day being tested just to get in, he said. Now, it's time for your first points evaluation. Once those gates open, you must stay inside for at least 30 minutes. Anyone who comes out early is disqualified. At the end of the session, the person with the lowest performance score goes home. The crowd groaned. We hadn't even had a chance to breathe. Clang. The gates swung open. Inside were rows of dimly lit, numbered rooms. A heavy, oppressive feeling drifted out from the darkness. Nobody moved. The unknown was always the most terrifying part. Get in, Ma Jun ordered. I walked inside and followed the corridor until I found room 37. Around me, other students were hesitating, pressing their ears against the doors to hear what was inside. 30 minutes? Doesn't seem that hard, someone muttered nearby. It sounds perfectly quiet in there. A burly guy stood by one of the doors, pressing his ear against the cold metal. He listened for a long time, then frowned. The room was silent. There was no sound of movement, no growls, nothing. It's too quiet, someone whispered. There has to be a catch. You really think the camp would make it this easy? Maybe we just stay out here? Another student suggested, his voice trembling. If we don't go in, the time still passes, right? A few people shot him looks of pure disgust. He was an idiot. This was a genius training camp. They didn't leave loopholes like that. If we didn't enter the rooms, our scores would be 0. The instructors were looking for any excuse to kick us out. They wouldn't hesitate to disqualify the lot of us. Who's going to open a door first? Someone asked. The group went quiet. Then, as if they'd rehearsed it, everyone turned to look at me. Brother Chin, a tall, handsome guy said with a fake smile. You were the top performer during the entry test. You're clearly the strongest here. Why don't you open yours first? If there's a trap, you're the most likely to handle it. Yeah, Chin, we're all counting on you, a girl added. She had a great figure but a plain face, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. The others stayed silent, but their eyes said enough. They all knew I was a replacement who got in through a back door. They wanted to use me as a guinea pig. I gave them a cold, sideways glance. I didn't say a word as I stepped up to the control panel for room 37. I reached out and hovered my finger over the switch. I'm opening the door, I said flatly. But I'm not doing it to scout for you. The strong have nothing to fear. Only the weak hesitate. I pressed the button. The heavy door slid open with a mechanical hiss. Without a second thought, I stepped into the darkness. The group stood frozen for a second, my words stinging their pride. He called us weak, someone muttered, his face turning red with anger. Forget that. Look inside. As my door began to slowly slide shut, the crowd rushed over to catch a glimpse of what I was facing. Their faces paled instantly. Mechanical puppets, someone gasped. Inside the room stood several metallic figures. These puppets came in all shapes, some human, some beast-like. They were high-tech training tools designed for combat. Even the weakest ones were at the early stage of body refining. But they weren't just dumb machines. They were loaded with combat chips containing the essence of human martial arts. A puppet was often more dangerous than a human at the same level because it never made mistakes and possessed perfect technical experience. Boom! A massive crash echoed from inside the room. The onlookers gasped. I had already moved. With a single, explosive punch, I sent one of the puppets flying across the room like a piece of scrap metal. The door clicked shut, cutting off their view. He blew it away, someone stammered. How? He's just a guy with a connection. Is he actually that strong? The atmosphere shifted. Some of the students started to look worried. Maybe they had misjudged me. Give me a break. The tall, handsome guy from before laughed loudly. Real strength? I'm from high school number 2. We're right next to his school. I know their roster. Their top student was Wang Chong. He's been number 1 since freshman year. I've been tracking him because he was supposed to be my rival. He crossed his arms and sneered. Who the hell is Chin Chun? I've never heard of him. My guess? That puppet wasn't even activated yet. It was probably a half-finished prototype. He looked around at the others. You guys are all the top students from your schools. Any of you ever heard the name Chin Chun before today? Silence. Nobody had. They knew Wang Chong, but I was a ghost to them. I'll prove it to you, the guy said, cracking his knuckles. Remember my name, Yang Shuai, from high school number 2. Yang Shuai marched over to his own door. He didn't hesitate. He hit the switch and the door slid open. The crowd followed him, eager to see the truth. Watch closely, Yang Shuai called out as he stepped inside. He charged at a puppet in the center of his room. As he got close, a red light flickered on the puppet's chest. Yang Shuai grinned, thinking he had caught it off guard. He threw a heavy punch. The puppet reacted instantly. Its metal arm swung out with blinding speed. Crack! A figure came flying backward out of the room. The students standing by the door scrambled out of the way just as Yang Shuai slammed into the opposite wall. He hit the floor hard, his head lolling to the side. He was out cold. Holy crap, it's not a prototype, someone whispered. An alarm blared through the corridor. 2 medics appeared within seconds, loaded Yang Shuai onto a stretcher, and hauled him away. Less than 5 minutes, one medic muttered to the other. That's the second one disqualified already. At this rate, we're going to lose half the class today. The remaining students turned back toward room 37. This time, their eyes were filled with pure shock. Inside my room, I pulled my fist back. The puppet in front of me was sparking, smoke rising from its joints. It slumped over, completely neutralized. I heard the alarm from outside and smiled. Someone had already failed. These puppets were no joke. Most of the students ranked 30th or lower weren't even at the middle stage of body refining yet. Surviving 30 minutes against these things was going to be a nightmare for them. I looked around. There were 9 puppets left in my room. There's no way they're all just early stage, I thought. That would be too easy. I realized the puppets only activated when I got within 2 meters of them. If I wanted to play it safe, I could just trigger one and kite it for 30 minutes. But I saw the cameras in the corners of the ceiling. The instructors were watching. Points weren't just about surviving. They were about performance. If I wanted the top spot, I had to do something they'd never seen. I didn't wait. I sprinted forward, crossing the 2-meter line of the next puppet. Red light flashed. It lunged at me. Instead of fighting it, I pivoted and ran straight toward the 3rd one. Then the 4th. In seconds, I had triggered all 9 remaining puppets. The room erupted into a frenzy of clanking metal and whirring servos. Outside, the alarms were going off like crazy as more students were knocked out of their rooms. The medic who had just cleared Yang Shui stopped and looked toward my door. The sound of crashing metal and heavy impacts coming from room 37 was deafening. "What is going on in there?" he whispered, eyes wide. Did he activate all of them at once? The medic outside my room froze. He probably thought I was already unconscious, face down on the cold floor. There was no way a student could cause this much noise unless something had gone horribly wrong. He likely suspected the puppets had malfunctioned and started tearing each other apart. He didn't have the clearance to override the lock while the room was occupied. Panicked, he pressed his face against the small observation port in the door. He let out a sharp gasp, his eyes nearly popping out of his head. Inside the room, for puppets were already shattered heaps of scrap metal on the floor. I was a blur of motion, weaving through the remaining machines with terrifying ease. Every time I swung my fist, it landed like a heavy sledgehammer. One punch, one puppet. The medic couldn't believe his eyes. This wasn't just a fight, it was a massacre. These puppets were expensive pieces of military tech designed with high durability. Usually, once they took a certain amount of damage, they'd shut down to save costs. But I wasn't just damaging them. I was hitting them with such raw, concentrated force that they were literally exploding. They weren't just deactivated, they were total write-offs. Beyond repair. At the same time, in the central command center, a soldier carrying a stack of files walked toward a woman in a crisp military uniform. "Instructor Yang," he said, placing the documents on her desk. "These are the profiles for this year's training camp recruits." Yang Shui didn't look at the files. She looked at the man. "Instructor Luo, have you reviewed them?" Luo Bin nodded. "I skimmed through. This batch is definitely better than last year's, but there aren't many standout stars. 2 of them reached the peak stage of body refining before the entrance exams. That's solid." Yang Shui smiled faintly. Reaching that level before the exams meant they had a real shot at becoming 1-star martial arts practitioners during the finals. "That's more than enough talent," she noted. "In a normal year, I'd agree," Luo Bin replied, shaking his head. But with the first ever General Star selection coming up, Yang Shui's expression turned serious. The General Star selection was a massive deal. The country was divided into several war zones, and our Jiang province was part of the Western Zone. Each zone was looking for one supreme talent, a General Star, from the pool of high school seniors under 18. Because it was the inaugural year, the pressure was on every instructor. If a General Star came from your camp, the prestige was immeasurable. I've heard other provinces in the Western Zone already have 1-star martial artists, Luo Bin continued. In Jiang province, we have nothing. Not in Rongqing, not anywhere. We're going to be invisible in this competition. Yang Shui sighed and finally picked up the files. She flipped to the 2 peak stage students, Yu Yang and Su Fei. "Bring up their room feeds," she commanded. Luo Bin tapped the screen, enlarging the feeds for room 1 and room 2. Yu Yang and Su Fei were both performing well. They had each activated 3 puppets at once, including 1 late-stage model, and were winning. "They're good," Yang Shui admitted, her face remaining neutral. "Focus our resources on them. Also, Tell the other camps in the province to pick their best 1 or 2 students. We'll hold a pre-selection match. Even if we don't win the general star title, we can't let Jiang province look like a joke. Understood, Luo Bin said. Want to see any other rooms? Yang Shui waved him off. The room numbers were assigned based on school records and proven cultivation. Anyone past the first few rooms wouldn't even be at the peak stage. She wasn't interested in mediocrity. Suddenly, a staff member burst into the command center, looking pale. What are you doing here? Luo Bin barked. You're supposed to be clearing out the failures. Sir, ma'am, something happened, the man panted. Yang Shui's eyes narrowed. Did a student get hurt? It happens sometimes when kids with connections fake their way in and got crushed by the puppets. No, it's the puppets, the staffer stammered. Room 37. You need to see this. Luo Bin frowned and pulled up the feed for room 37. The second the image flickered to life, he froze. Yang Shui stood up, so fast her chair nearly hit the wall. She stared at me, standing calmly in the center of the room. Rewind it, she whispered. Luo Bin realized the puppets on the floor weren't glitching. They had been demolished. He hit the playback button, and they watched the footage of me activating all 9 puppets at once. That power, Luo Bin muttered, his voice shaking. Look at his fists. That's fire attribute. He's tapped into the fire element. To hit that hard. Has he already broken through to become a martial artist? Look at his movement, Yang Shui interrupted, her eyes glued to the screen. Luo Bin watched closer. I was dancing through the chaos. Despite being surrounded by 9 machines, not a single one had managed to touch me. I was dodging with a precision that didn't make sense. Fire users shouldn't be that agile, Luo Bin noted. Did he learn a movement technique? But you can only learn those after breaking through. Yang Shui didn't look away from the screen as I dropped another puppet. Look again, she said. Luo Bin's jaw dropped. He looked at the energy readings. There was no elemental seal. He hasn't broken through yet. He's still at the peak stage of body refining. But that movement, that's the wind element. Yang Shui nodded slowly. Dual element peak stage. No wonder he has the combat power of a 1-star martial artist. Luo Bin finally understood. I was a dual cultivator of wind and fire. My strength and agility didn't just exceed the peak of body refining. They had crossed the threshold into the territory of a 1-star martial artist. The footage ended quickly, lasting less than 10 minutes in total. Luo Bin sighed, his voice full of regret. If I had known, I would have thrown a 1-star martial artist puppet in there. The challenge I had just faced was designed to be impossible for a body refiner. 3 early-stage puppets, 3 mid-stage, 2 late-stage, and 2 peak-stage. For a normal student, it was a death trap. For someone with the power of a true martial artist, however, it was a breeze. Yang Shui let out a sharp laugh. It looks like we actually have a chance to compete in the star-falling competition this year. Luo Bin started to grin, but Yang Shui shot him a cold look. Don't get ahead of yourself. Being a dual-element peak stage is impressive, but there's still a gap between him and a real martial artist. Dual cultivation takes twice the time. Even if my combat power hits the 1-star level now, my progress will be much slower than others. In other provinces, there are geniuses who have already broken through and are sprinting toward 2-star status. You're right, Luo Bin admitted, his eyes narrowing as he watched the frozen image of me on the screen. But don't forget, one of his elements is fire. We have a fire element cultivation room here. With his talent, if we let him in there, it won't be long before he officially breaks through. Then his power will skyrocket. He was already mapping out my entire training schedule. We follow the rules, Yang Shui said, flipping through her files. Also, keep the focus on Yu Yang and Su Fei. We need to push them. Luo Bin caught her drift immediately. You want to use them to pressure Qinshin? Yang Shui nodded. A gem isn't polished without friction. Our chances at the star-falling competition are still slim, but at least this time, Jiang province won't finish in dead last. We can fight for a decent rank. I just hope the pressure doesn't break Yu Yang and Su Fei instead, Luo Bin joked. Yang Shui ignored him, her brow furrowed as she looked at the paperwork sent by First High. Wang Chong, only at the late stage of body refining? What kind of garbage data is this? She sounded insulted, as if the school was playing a joke on her. A soldier standing nearby cleared his throat. Officer Yang, He isn't Wang Chong. First High swapped their candidate at the last minute. His name is Qin Shin. They called just now to update us, saying he's at the peak stage, but they never mentioned he was a dual-element user. Meanwhile, I stepped out of room 37. Ma Jun was waiting for me, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and newfound respect. He already knew what I had done inside. Well done, Qin Shun, Ma Jun said, his voice unusually formal. Your ID number has been updated to number 1. Here is your key. You'll be staying in Lounge 1. Tomorrow, your points will be credited. I took the heavy brass key and headed toward the living quarters. In another part of the facility, Yu Yang stepped out of room 1. His face was pale, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had managed to defeat the 2 late-stage puppets, but he was spent. I was careless, Yu Yang muttered to himself. Those puppets have combat chips. Their experience is way beyond mine. Defeating a peak-stage puppet is impossible right now. But it doesn't matter. No one else could have done better than me. I'll definitely have the most points. He didn't push himself further. He opened his door and walked out, confident he was the top dog. At the exact same time, Su Fei stepped out of room 2. He had made the same choice, reaching his limit and deciding to settle for what he had. The 2 rivals locked eyes, both wearing expressions of immense pride. I had 2 peak-stage puppets left, Yu Yang said, testing the waters. Su Fei remained expressionless, but his eyes were sharp. Interesting, Yu Yang smiled. The lounges are assigned based on performance, starting from number 1. Let's see who the instructors think is the real leader. They marched toward Ma Jun, standing tall and waiting for their rewards. Ma Jun looked at them and gave a small, approving nod. Not bad. You both defeated 7 puppets. It's normal that you couldn't handle the peak stage once. You've done excellently. Thank you, instructor, they shouted in unison, their chests swelling. Since your records are identical, the lounge assignment is a bit tricky, Ma Jun said. Instructor Ma, my original ID was number 1 anyway, Yu Yang cut in quickly. Just give me Lounge 1 to keep it simple. Su Fei wasn't about to let that slide. Instructor, Lounge 1 has the best facilities, the most space, and the best soundproofing. If our scores are the same, it shouldn't just go to him by default. They started bickering, both desperate for the prestige that came with the first room. Ma Jun raised a hand, silencing them instantly. Are you finished? Ma Jun asked. They shut their mouths. Good, because Lounge 1 is already taken. I've decided. Yu Yang, you get Lounge 2. Su Fei, you get Lounge 3. The 2 of them froze. Their faces turned to stone. Instructor Ma, who got Lounge 1? Yu Yang asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. They didn't care about 2nd or 3rd place. Nobody remembers the runner-up. Qin Shun, from First High, Ma Jun said flatly. They stood there in shock. Yu Yang opened his mouth to protest, but Ma Jun's expression turned stern. Take your keys and go to your rooms. Now, they had no choice but to walk away, but their hearts were burning with resentment. Qin Shun, Yu Yang hissed once they were out of earshot. The guy who got in through backroom connections? It has to be, Su Fei muttered, his grip tightening on his key. How powerful are his connections that they just hand him Lounge 1? That room is a symbol of strength in this camp. I don't care who his family is, Yu Yang snapped. In this camp, you eventually have to show your own skills. When the real tests happen in front of everyone, we'll see how he holds on to that number 1 spot. He's going to embarrass himself. Ma Jun watched them go, a small smirk playing on his lips. This was exactly the fire he wanted to light under them. The next morning, the camp was buzzing with a new kind of fear. 38 people had been eliminated in a single night. Only 34 of us were left. And from now on, at least 1 person would be sent home every single day. The real nightmare was just beginning. Early the next morning, the camp cafeteria was buzzing with rumors. The atmosphere was heavy. Out of the 34 of us who survived the first cut, more than half were nursing visible injuries. I sat in a corner, eating quietly while listening to the chatter around me. That mechanical puppet was a monster. One student groaned, rubbing his bruised ribs. I barely made it out. I was smart, though. I only activated the body refining primary stage settings. That's the only reason I passed. His friends laughed, calling him clever. In this place, everyone was trying to game the system to survive. Most people only fought what they knew they could handle. But then, A voice cut through the noise. "You guys have no idea," a student from the room block next to mine said, his voice dropping to a whisper. In my section, there was a guy who didn't just pass. He completely destroyed every single puppet in his room. They were all smashed to pieces. The cafeteria went dead silent. Everyone turned to look at him. Then, the sneering started. They recognized him as a student from the lower-ranked rooms. "Yeah, right," someone scoffed. "Even geniuses like Yu Yang and Su Fei didn't fully destroy their puppets. You're telling me some random guy at the back of the hall did? You're delusional." The student tried to argue, but he eventually gave up and slumped into his seat. In his section, only he and I had passed. Everyone else had been sent home. He had no witnesses to back him up. "I believe you." A tall, sturdy boy walked up to his table. "My name is Zhou Lei," he said firmly. The other student, Huang Jian, looked up in surprise. "Why? I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't seen the wreckage with my own eyes." "You're talking about room 37, right?" Zhou Lei whispered. "Qin Shin from First High." Huang Jian nodded quickly. "Then it's true," Zhou Lei said, his eyes shimmering with a mix of awe and fear. "I saw him during the mountain climb. He moved uphill like he was walking on flat ground. The guy is a freak." Suddenly, Zhou Lei's eyes locked onto me as I walked toward a table with my tray. He stood up immediately. "Want to come over and talk to him?" he asked Huang Jian. Huang Jian's face went pale. He shook his head frantically. He had caught a glimpse of me during the test, punching a puppet so hard it flew across the room. At the time, he thought it was just a low-level setting. But when he walked past my open door later and saw the pile of scrap metal that used to be 10 puppets, he realized I was dangerous. He was terrified of me. I sat down and started eating when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up. It was Zhou Lei. "Qin Shun, hello," he said, acting very polite. I didn't recognize him at first. I hadn't spoken to a single person since arriving at camp. "Do I know you?" "You might not remember, but I asked which school you were from during the climb," he said with a nervous smile. I nodded and took a bite of meat. "Do you need something?" The conversation hit a wall. Zhou Lei looked awkward, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He took a deep breath, his face turning serious. "I want to be your follower," he said, then immediately dropped his head, unable to look me in the eye. I stopped chewing and smiled. "My follower? You know everyone here thinks I'm just a guy with backroom connections. If you hang out with me, people are going to talk. They'll despise you too." I expected him to back down, but he looked up, his gaze steady. "I don't care what they think. I know you got here on your own strength. You don't bother explaining yourself to them because they aren't worth your time. I admire that." I liked his attitude. He had a good head on his shoulders. I put my chopsticks down. Having a follower isn't the worst idea. But what's in it for me? Zhou Lei blinked. He seemed caught off guard, as if he thought the offer itself was enough. He scrambled for an answer. "Information. I can find out anything you need to know about this camp. I'm good at digging." "Fair enough," I said. "I'll give you a task. Find out which students are elemental cultivators. I also want to know if there are any special training rooms and who exactly is running this camp." Elemental cultivators were the key to my next breakthrough, and special rooms meant more power. As for the person in charge, I was just curious. "I actually already know some of that," Zhou Lei said, leaning in. "I have a distant relative working in the logistics department here. I grilled him last night." He lowered his voice. "There are 5 elemental cultivators in this camp. 1 for each of the 5 basic elements. Special elements like lightning or wind are rare. Usually, you only find those in Yang City where the tech and research are centered. The training rooms have the standard gravity and infrared chambers, but this year, they added something new, a combat room. Nobody knows exactly how it works yet." He paused, his eyes lighting up with gossip. "As for the person in charge, her name is Yang Shui. She's a legend. She was the top student of this very camp years ago. After graduating, she went straight to the Western War Zone. She's only in her 30s, but she's already a senior colonel. You don't get that rank just with talent. You have to kill a lot of enemies on the front lines to earn it." I nodded, satisfied. This kid was actually useful. Saving myself the time of digging for this information was worth having him around. A loud announcement blared through the cafeteria, cutting our conversation short. We were ordered to gather at the training camp square within 10 minutes. The voice warned that anyone late would be eliminated immediately. Everyone dropped their chopsticks and sprinted toward the square. I stood up and walked at a steady pace, with Zhou Lei following closely behind like a shadow. We reached the square and lined up. A few minutes later, two figures in military uniforms approached us. One was a man, the other a woman. The man stepped forward and spoke with a booming voice. "I am Luo Bin," he shouted. "And this is your commander and head instructor, Colonel Yang Shui. She has a few words for you." The crowd went silent instantly. Yang Shui scanned us with a cold, sharp gaze. "Congratulations on making it to this camp," she began. "Now, listen to the rules. You will earn points during your training. These points are your lifeblood. You need them to use the training facilities, and you'll find other uses for them soon enough." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "There are only two ways to get points. First, based on your daily performance as evaluated by Instructor Luo or myself. Second, by challenging others. If you win, their points are yours. If you lose, you give up everything. Every challenge is an all-or-nothing bet. If your points hit 0, you are kicked out of the camp." The atmosphere shifted. The students looked at each other with newfound suspicion. The first method was vague since there was no clear standard for performance. The second method was brutal. One loss meant going home. "Instructor, are there any restrictions on challenges?" someone asked. It was a fair question. If a peak body refiner could just bully a beginner and take their points, the weaker students wouldn't last a day. Yang Shui smiled thinly. "For the sake of fairness, if a higher-ranked student wants to challenge someone lower, they must first defeat 2 opponents of their own rank consecutively. Only then can they issue the challenge. However, a lower-ranked student can challenge a higher-ranked one at any time. The same applies to those of equal rank." A collective sigh of relief swept through the lower-ranked students. This meant the top dogs couldn't just farm them for points without risk. Beating 2 equal opponents was a tall order for anyone. Yu Yang and Su Fei, the 2 peak stage students, looked frustrated. They wouldn't even have enough peers to satisfy the requirement if they wanted to target the rest of us. "We are now handing out your student IDs," Yang Shui announced. Ma Jun stepped forward, holding a stack of cards. "Instructors Yang and Luo have already assigned your initial points based on your performance in the puppet rooms yesterday. Your IDs are linked to these points. When you get back to your rooms, you can check your balance on the machines provided." He looked at the crowd, his expression unreadable. "Also, your room numbers from yesterday were temporary. The number on your new ID is your official room assignment. These rankings were determined after the instructors reviewed the surveillance footage of your trials." The air grew tense with anticipation. Yu Yang and Su Fei looked especially eager. They both clearly expected to take the number 1 spot. "Who do you think got number 1? Someone whispered. "My bet is on Yu Yang." "Maybe it's still Qin Shin?" another suggested. "No way," a third student countered. "Distributing IDs publicly like this is a statement. Everyone will know your rank and your points. The number 1 card is a giant target." They were right. By making the rankings public, the instructors were encouraging us to fight. If I ended up with the number 1 card again, everyone would assume I was just a well-connected fraud. I'd be the easiest mark in the camp. Ma Jun started calling names. "Number 34, Xiaoming." A boy stepped out, looking relieved. Being last meant he had the fewest points, making him a low-priority target for anyone looking to score big. It was safer at the bottom. "Number 33, Ma Jun continued. As the numbers climbed, people started glancing at me. The top 5 were called, and my name still hadn't been mentioned. "Number 4, Du Hui. Number 3, Su Fei." Su Fei stiffened. He marched forward, grabbed his card, and stomped back to his spot, his face twisting with anger. Losing to Yu Yang was one thing, but being ranked below me was a slap in the face. A student leaned toward Su Fei and whispered, "Brother Fei, do you want me to challenge him for you?" Su Fei looked at the boy. His name was Mo Qing, a guy who had been sucking up to him since we arrived. Su Fei usually ignored him, but now he saw an opportunity. "Fine," Su Fei muttered. "If you win, you keep the points. If anyone tries to mess with you later, tell them you're with me." Mo Qing beamed. He was ranked 17th, a dangerous middle ground position. Having Su Fei's protection was worth the risk of fighting a connected student like me. He looked at me, already imagining his easy victory. With Su Fei's backing, Mo Qing felt untouchable. He figured that anyone wanting to challenge him later would have to think twice about crossing his new patron. Ma Jun continued calling out names. Finally, after Yu Yang collected his card and stepped back, it was my turn. I walked up to Ma Jun, my expression neutral. This training camp is going to be different from the ones in the past, Ma Jun said, his voice dropping as he patted my shoulder. Use this time to get as strong as you possibly can. Do you understand? I nodded. I didn't overthink his warning, but I could tell he was serious. All right, listen up. Ma Jun shouted to the crowd. From here on out, how you spend your time in this camp is up to you. If you have questions about your cultivation, you can ask me. If I don't know the answer, you can ask Instructor Luo or Instructor Yang. He paused, a cold smile playing on his lips. But guidance isn't free. Every consultation will cost you points. A collective groan went up from the students. The reality of the situation was sinking in. Points weren't just for rankings. They were the currency for everything, even knowledge. That's all. Dismissed, Ma Jun said, waving a hand. Instructor, a voice barked out. Everyone turned to see Mo Ching stepping forward. He looked around, enjoying the attention, before looking up at the instructors. The rules for challenges weren't very specific, Mo Ching said. I want to know, can a student refuse a challenge? And how do we actually start one? Instructor Yang Shui stepped forward with a small, knowing smile. I should have been clearer. Regarding challenges, if a student is challenged for the first time in a single day, they cannot refuse. After that first fight, it's up to them whether they want to accept any more for the day. It was a simple system. You had to fight at least once a day if someone called you out. But if you lost that first fight, your points would be wiped out anyway. Nobody was going to waste their time challenging a student with 0 points who was already on the verge of being kicked out. One more thing, Yang Shui added. If your points hit 0, you won't be expelled until 8 a.m. the next morning. That gives you a small window to try and claw some points back to stay in the camp. As for how to challenge someone, she pointed toward the distance. See that arena? We all turned. In the distance stood a raised stone platform. That stage is for challenges. Beside it is a bronze gong. Strike the gong, announce your target's name, and we'll bring them to you. Any more questions? Silence followed. After waiting a few seconds, Yang Shui and Luo Bin turned and walked away. Ma Jun gave us a dismissive wave and headed off as well. I turned toward the dormitory area. I wanted to check my current point balance and find the fire element cultivation room to start condensing my element mark as soon as possible. I hadn't even taken 5 steps when a loud, metallic thud echoed through the air. Dong! The sound of the gong stopped everyone in their tracks. Even Ma Jun, who was already far off, stopped and looked back with an interested glint in his eyes. I challenged Qin Shun of First High. Mo Ching shouted. He stood by the gong, his chest puffed out, looking incredibly smug. Being the first person to issue a challenge meant all eyes were on him. In his mind, he was a hero standing up against injustice by taking down the guy he thought was a fraud. Let's go see, someone whispered. The crowd started moving toward the arena. Most of them wanted to challenge me themselves, but they were happy to let Mo Ching be the guinea pig to see just how weak the connected student really was. Ma Jun watched from a distance, frowning at Mo Ching. He knew the rumors, but he found it pathetic. Did these kids really think I got the top spot just through connections? Especially with Yang Shui as the commander? She was famous for being incorruptible. If a student had no brains to match their talent, they wouldn't last long. Ma Jun shook his head and kept walking. He didn't need to watch. He already knew the outcome. I walked toward the arena, my eyes narrowed. I didn't wait for anyone to come get me. I walked straight up to the stage. You're sure you want to challenge me? I asked, staring Mo Ching down. You don't have the right to refuse, Mo Ching sneered. I nodded and stepped onto the platform. If everyone thought I was a fraud, fine. I'd use this opportunity to send a message so loud that no one would dare bother me again. A man in a military uniform stepped onto the stage between us. I will be the referee for all challenges. There are no rules here except one: no killing. You have 3 seconds to prepare. Start. The referee didn't waste time. The air beneath the stage grew tense. Qin Shun, I don't have a personal grudge against you, Mo Ching said, trying to sound noble. But the resources of this camp belong to real geniuses. You should just go home. As soon as the words left his mouth, He lunged. His foot slammed into the stone, and his body shot forward like a bolt. He was fast, showing the explosive power of a top-tier student. The crowd gasped. I didn't move. I just stood there as he closed the distance. 5 meters. 4. 3. Why isn't he moving? Someone shouted. Is he frozen in fear? My boss can take that kid down without even trying. Zhou Lei yelled from the crowd, unable to stay quiet any longer. Boss? Someone mocked. You're just sucking up to his family background. What's the point of having a powerful father if you can't even dodge a punch? Zhou Lei turned red with anger and moved closer to Huang Jian. Among the students, only Huang Jian seemed to know what was coming. He watched the stage with anticipation. Mo Qing was 2 meters away now. He pulled his fist back, aiming straight for my chest. This punch is putting you in the hospital. Don't worry, you'll be out by the time college entrance exams start. His fist whistled through the air. I remained calm, watching the trajectory. Just as the blow was about to land, I reached out. Bam! My palm met his fist. The impact was heavy, but I didn't budge an inch. Mo Qing's entire body came to a dead stop. His eyes widened in shock. He tried to pull back, but my grip was like a steel vise. Crack! The sound of snapping bone echoed across the arena. I lifted my arm, hoisting his entire body into the air, and slammed him down onto the stone floor. Thud! A blood-curdling scream tore from his throat, followed by a sickening silence. Mo Qing lay crumpled on the stage, out cold. The crowd went dead silent. They stared at the unconscious body, then at me. I stood there, my expression unchanged, as if I had just swatted a fly. Qin Chen wins, the referee announced, breaking the silence. I didn't say a word to anyone. I turned and walked off the stage. The points would be transferred to my card within the hour. I had work to do. The referee stood on the stage, staring at my back as I walked away. I could feel his eyes on me, filled with pure disbelief. He knew this training camp was run by Yang Shui, meaning there was no room for connections or favoritism. He had assumed I was the strongest in this batch, but he clearly hadn't expected me to be this dominant. I stepped down from the arena, one foot after another. As I approached the crowd, the sea of students instinctively parted, carving a wide path for me. My expression remained flat. I didn't look back. If anyone else wants to challenge me, wait until tomorrow, I said, my voice cold and steady. My schedule is tight. I don't accept second challenges on the same day. The silence that followed was heavy. The students exchanged complex looks, their faces pale. Challenge me? After what they just saw, nobody was that suicidal. Even the top dogs, Yu Yang and Su Fei, stood frozen, their eyes locked onto my retreating figure without uttering a single word. Once I was far enough away, the silence broke into a frantic roar of whispers. Who the hell said he was just a charity case? Someone hissed. Stand up and say it now? That move he pulled. I felt the pain just watching it. He was the first to arrive, the first to clear the mechanical puppets, and the first to get a private room, another added. It wasn't luck. It was raw power. Suddenly, a loud, obnoxious laugh echoed through the clearing. I didn't have to look back to know it was Zhou Lei. He was wearing a look of absolute triumph, scanning the crowd with his chin held high. I told you, Zhou Lei shouted, looking down his nose at everyone. My boss just needs to stand there to flatten people. Anyone else want to doubt him? This time, no one argued. In fact, the mockery in their eyes had turned into envy. Brother Zhou, one student stammered, trying to get close. Could you, maybe introduce me to your boss? Yeah, Zhou, I'd really like to get to know Qin Chun. These were all supposed geniuses, but they weren't stupid. They saw the gap. At our age, the difference between the early stages of body refining and the peak stage wasn't just a few levels. It was a chasm of talent and potential. I'll see what I can do, Zhou Lei chuckled, feeling like a king. He thought to himself how his old man back home wouldn't dare call him a failure after this. He was officially a big shot in the genius camp. I made it back to my lounge and checked my points. I had earned 10,000 from the puppet trial, essentially a perfect score. I didn't care much about the points from beating Mo Qing. I had bigger priorities. I left the room immediately and headed toward the cultivation building. The building housed all the elemental and special cultivation rooms. I walked into the first floor office to register. Elemental rooms cost 2,000 points per session, the staff member explained. Other rooms are 1,000. I felt a sting of surprise. That was steep. Even with my winnings, most of the 30-odd students here wouldn't be able to afford more than a few sessions. I need the fire element room, I said, handing over my student card. The staff member's eyes went wide when he saw the number 1 on the card. He looked up at me, swiped the card to deduct the 2,000 points, and handed it back. Fire rooms are on this floor, to the left. There are 5 of them. Pick any one, he said, his tone turning respectful. Just a heads up. Your access is for 1 entry only. If you leave the room, the session ends. Stay in as long as you can, or you'll have to pay another 2,000 to get back in. Thanks, I nodded and walked out. Behind me, the staff started whispering. That's number 1. How long do you think he'll last? The record is 3 hours. I say 3 hours, one guessed. He cleared the puppets, so he's tough, but the heat is different. I'm betting 5 hours, an older staff member named Oldly said firmly. That kid has eyes like steel. It's not just about elemental sensitivity, it's about sheer will. I reached the door, swiped my card, and heard a heavy click. As the door slid open, a wave of scorching heat slammed into my face. The air shimmered. They weren't joking about the 15 times cultivation speed. I stepped inside and the door sealed shut. At first, the heat felt like it would blister my skin, but as the fire elements wrapped around me, a strange, cooling sensation followed. I didn't waste a second. I sat cross-legged and began running my elemental mantra. The fire energy I had stored during my body refining phase resonated with the intense heat of the room. I held my hands on my knees, focusing every ounce of my will on condensing my elemental mark. Boom. 2 spheres of flame ignited in my palms, dancing and shrinking as I compressed them. The flames transformed into raw fire essence, surging through my palms and into my body. The mark was forming at a terrifying speed, 10 times faster than anything I'd experienced outside. An hour passed. My mark was 8% complete. Subtracting the 4% I already had, I had gained 4% in just 60 minutes. Beads of sweat began to roll down my forehead. The temperature in the room was rising steadily. I realized then why the staff told me to stay as long as possible. The room was designed to push you out. 2 hours in, I was drenched. 3 hours in, the sweat was dripping off my chin like rain. But I didn't feel like quitting. I was ecstatic. My mark was now 24% complete. The hotter it got, the faster the energy condensed. That 15 times speed was just the starting point. Outside the room, a crowd had gathered. Staff and students were staring at the timer on the door. 3 hours, someone whispered. He just tied the record. I told you, Oldly said, his voice full of pride. He's not done yet. He's going for 5. 4 hours passed. The crowd went silent, their faces masked with pure shock. When the clock hit the 5th hour, the crowd outside went silent. The atmosphere shifted from excitement to pure disbelief. Oldly started pushing people back, trying to clear a path. He told everyone to give me space, saying I'd need to cool down the second I stepped out. He kept his eyes glued to the door, waiting for it to hiss open. But the minutes kept ticking by. The door didn't budge. 6 hours passed. That was double the previous record. Faces in the hallway started to pale. Someone whispered that I might be dead, but then a loud, arrogant voice cut through the chatter. It was Jolet. He looked at the crowd with a smug grin and told them not to worry. He claimed I could stay in there for at least 10 hours. Internally, he was sweating bullets. He had never even been inside an elemental room, but he had blind faith in me. Oldly looked at him like he was crazy. He explained that after 10 hours, the temperature would hit 60 degrees Celsius. It wasn't just heat. It was like being baked alive under a desert sun without a breeze, after already enduring hours of rising torture. He didn't think a body-refining student could survive that. Even a 1-star warrior would struggle. Jolet just lifted his chin and acted tough. The others looked at him like he was an idiot. Inside the room, I was at my absolute limit. My skin was beet red, and the veins on my forehead were bulging. An hour ago, I had reached the breaking point for a normal body refining peak. I had forced myself to endure another 60 minutes of agony. My fire mark was at 50%. I could have left then, recovered, and spent another 2,000 points to come back later. but I didn't want to waste the time. I needed to finish this now. I took a deep breath and whispered one word: wind. A cool breeze suddenly circulated through my internal meridians. The refreshing sensation washed over my scorched skin. The redness faded, and my sweat stopped pouring. This was the true advantage of being a multi-elemental user. I smiled and went back to work. Outside, 8 hours had passed. The silence was heavy. A student suggested I might have fainted, but the staff shook their heads. They said an alarm would trigger if my vitals dropped. Then someone asked what would happen if the alarm was broken. The staff turned pale. Jolie kept up the act, insisting 10 hours was the goal. Oldly stared at the door, praying the equipment was just high quality and not malfunctioning. When the clock hit 10 hours, Oldly turned to Jolie, demanding to know how he was so sure. Jolie had no real answer, but he stood his ground. He told them 10 hours was just an estimate and that I could probably do 11. Oldly was shaken. He had seen many geniuses, but this was beyond his imagination. The crowd began to look at the door with genuine respect. Inside, I hit 90% completion. My body reached its limit again. I whispered another command, and the temperature around me plummeted. My ice element kicked in, providing a sudden, blissful chill that countered the furnace-like room. The final part of the mark was the hardest to condense, but with the cooling relief, my speed didn't drop. 11 hours passed. Still no movement. Oldly finally snapped. He realized 12 hours was something even most one-star warriors couldn't handle. He screamed for someone to call Commander Yang Shui. The room was locked tight, and only she had the emergency override. Yang Shui and Luo Bin arrived minutes later, sprinting down the hall. She was furious that they hadn't called her sooner. 12 hours was approaching the territory of a 2-star warrior. She ignored Zhou Lei, who was now shaking with fear, and slammed her emergency card into the slot. Inside the room, a boom echoed in my chest. The fire mark hit 100%. A surge of raw power exploded through my limbs, growing stronger by the second. I stood up, feeling the transformation. I was no longer just a student. I was a 1-star warrior. I checked my internal status. My fire element had reached the 1-star stage, complete with its first divine rune. My wind and ice elements were still at the peak of body refining. But my total combat power had skyrocketed to 704. The standard for a 2-star warrior was 700. I had bypassed the entire 1-star power bracket in a single session. I wasn't just a warrior. I was invincible among my peers. A notification pinged in my mind. I had completed the 4th god-level mission. I checked my system storage and saw 2 glowing shards waiting for me. They were marked fragments for my wind and ice elements. I took a deep breath, feeling the power thrumming under my skin. The door behind me finally hissed open. I looked at the rewards in my system storage. One was a wind mark fragment, and the other was an ice mark fragment. The system called them random rewards, but I knew better. It was calculating what I actually needed. It could have given me 2 of the same, but it chose to balance my elements. Beside the shard sat a special box. A martial arts gift pack. I wanted to rip it open right then, but I stopped myself. I checked my surroundings. The temperature in the training room was still climbing, nearing the heat levels required for a 2-star warrior. This place was perfect for condensing divine runes, but I realized something. Forming an element mark and condensing a divine rune were 2 completely different beasts. To get my second rune here, I'd have to stay for at least half a month. I couldn't do that. I wasn't at the level where I could survive 2 weeks without food. I straightened my clothes and headed for the door. Just as I reached for the handle, it hissed open with a sharp click. I looked up, startled. Yang Shui was standing right there. "Instructor Yang, what are you doing here?" I asked. The crowd behind her recoiled as if they had seen a ghost. They looked physically uncomfortable, stepping back instinctively. Yang Shui didn't move. She stared into my eyes. I knew what she saw. My pupils were flickering like twin flames. She felt it. The vibration of power. I was a 1-star warrior now, and with her experience, there was no hiding it. "Just seeing if you were dead yet," she said, her face a mask of cold indifference. Before I could even find a comeback, she turned to the gawking students. "What are you all doing here? Disperse. Now." The crowd vanished in seconds. No one dared to linger. She glanced at Luo Bin, gave a short nod, and walked away without another word. I stood in the hallway alone, scratching my head. It was all a bit bizarre. Outside the building, Luo Bin hurried to catch up with Yang Shui. He broke through, didn't he? He had wanted to ask me himself, but Yang Shui's presence had been too suffocating. She nodded slowly. He did. That kid is something else. 12 hours in that room. He's a freak. Luo Bin whistled, genuinely impressed. He's dual element. Maybe the wind element helped offset the heat? 12 hours is still insane, but it makes more sense if you factor that in. Maybe, Yang Shui replied. Neither of them were fire type or dual type, so they could only guess how I'd survive the bake. Luo Bin grinned. So, are we still having Yu Yang and Su Fei pressure him? He's a one-star warrior on day 2 of camp. He's going to end up crushing those two under the pressure instead. Yang Shui ignored him, but Luo Bin just shook his head and whispered to himself. He knew her. The colder she acted on the outside, the more shaken she was on the inside. She was likely ecstatic. Back in my private rest area, I pulled out the 2 fragments. They had no taste and melted the moment they touched my tongue. I felt a cool rush followed by a sharp breeze circulating through my veins. My wind and ice marks were beginning to take shape. I checked my status panel. My wind element progress was at 25%, while my ice element sat at 35%. I wasn't surprised. My wind talent was naturally lower, so it was always going to lag behind. Now, for the main event. I focused my mind on the martial arts gift pack. Don't let me down, I muttered. The box vanished, and several streaks of light shot into my vision, flooding my brain with information. The flame breathing technique. The wind breathing technique. The ice breathing technique. All 3 were grade 7 techniques. In our world, martial arts grades matched warrior ranks. Grade 7 was known as Grandmaster level. A 7-star warrior is a Grandmaster, and these techniques were considered the peak of power. To put it in perspective, when the genius Zhao Quan became a warrior, he was only rewarded with a grade 2 technique. Grade 7 techniques were usually reserved for those who had spilled blood for the military, people who had earned their skills through years of life and death service. Even better, these were evolutionary techniques. They could be upgraded even further. And though my wind and ice elements hadn't reached the warrior stage yet, I could start practicing their breathing patterns immediately. But there was more. A final technique appeared, the Raging Sun Punch. Another grade 7 Grandmaster skill. My combat power was about to hit a whole new level. I spent the next few hours burned these techniques into my memory until they felt like instinct. Once I was ready, I headed straight for the administrative wing to find Yang Shui. Instructor Yang, I need to request a leave of absence, I said. She frowned. Leave? It's the 2nd day of camp. What's the reason? My family situation is complicated, I explained. I need to move my parents into the warrior family housing district as soon as possible. I can't focus on training until they're safe. I didn't mention the Zhao family. I was talented, but I wasn't arrogant enough to think a high-ranking official like her would fight my personal battles for me. I had to handle them myself. Once my parents were behind the safety of the association's walls, I wouldn't care how much the Zhao family screamed for blood. Yang Shui studied me for a long moment before nodding. How long do you need? I'm not sure. About a week. Between the official warrior certification and moving house, I had a lot on my plate. I'll give you 10 days, she said. Handle your business and get back here. Thank you, instructor. I didn't expect Yang Shui to be so generous. 10 days was more than enough time. As soon as I left the room, she picked up the phone and called Luo Bin. She ordered him to dig into my entire background, including everyone I knew. She wanted details, and she wanted them fast. Luo Bin was surprised. He had never seen her take such an interest in a student before. When he asked why, she didn't even look up from her paperwork. She just said it was for the general star selection. Luo Bin froze. He knew the selection process required a background check to ensure total loyalty, but the event was still a long way off. Investigating someone this early wasn't Yang Shui's style, but he didn't push it. He just nodded and got to work. The next morning, I headed down the mountain toward the Martial Arts Association. I waited about half an hour before a taxi finally pulled up. As I got in, the driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. He said I looked familiar. Then it clicked for him. He was the same guy who had driven me to the association a few days ago. He joked about his business taking him all over the place. So, kid, he said, trying to be friendly. Did you fail your certification last time? Is that why you're going back so soon? I didn't feel like explaining, so I just nodded. The driver took that as a sign that I was depressed. He started giving me a motivational speech. He told me that when he was young, he failed his first certification too. He told me he never gave up. He practiced harder and harder, going back time and time again, because he believed persistence was the key to victory. And then what happened? I asked, genuinely curious. Did you finally pass? No, he sighed. I failed every single time. I didn't have any other skills, so I ended up driving this taxi. But hey, I didn't give up for a long time. So don't you quit either. I sat there in silence. I thought he was giving me a bowl of chicken soup for the soul, but it turned out to be poison. A few hours later, we pulled up to the Martial Arts Association. The driver gave me one last look of encouragement, telling me not to be discouraged if I failed again. But as I opened the door, a group of staff members in suits came rushing out of the building. At the head of the group was a man dressed in a sharp suit. The driver's eyes went wide. He recognized the man. It was Su Hua, the director and the second highest-ranking official in the entire association. The driver wondered aloud what kind of VIP the director was coming out to meet. He had been driving for years and had never seen Su Hua personally greet anyone. Then, Su Hua walked straight toward my door. "Brother Chin," he called out, his voice loud and respectful. "I figured you'd be arriving about now. I'm glad I didn't keep you waiting." The taxi driver's whole body shook. He slammed his foot on the gas and peeled away instantly, leaving a cloud of smoke behind. He was terrified. He realized he had just lectured someone who was being personally welcomed by the director. In Rongqing, not even the mayor's son got that kind of treatment. To him, I was a monster. Su Hua watched the taxi disappear and laughed, wondering why the drivers in this city were so aggressive. I just smiled and thanked him for coming out. I had called him right before leaving the mountain because I knew warrior certification was different from body refining. It usually required an appointment and a long wait. I didn't have time for that. Su Hua didn't mind. He knew a genius when he saw one. A boy not even 18 years old becoming a formal warrior was unheard of in Rongqing. He led me inside, dismissing the other staff members. We bypassed the first floor, which was for basic body refining tests, and headed to the second floor. This was where the real warriors, ranks 1 through 3, were certified. The higher floors were for even more powerful masters, but they were rarely used. When we reached the testing area, a few people were already waiting. The proctor on duty saw Su Hua and nearly tripped over himself to say hello. He was shocked to hear the director refer to me as a friend rather than a junior. He immediately asked if I wanted to skip the line. "No need," I said. "I'll wait my turn." The proctor nodded quickly and went back to work, though his tone became much more professional. He started explaining the testing process again, even though he had already done it for the others. The people in line started whispering, realizing I must be someone important. The first candidate, Zhang Xing, the proctor called out. "Rank 1 warrior certification. Begin." A man in his late 20s stood up from the first chair in the waiting area. He walked toward the testing machine, his nerves visible in the way he held his shoulders. "Place your hand on the sensor," the proctor said, pointing to the device. "Release as much of your internal force as you can." The man took a deep breath. He raised his hand slowly, almost hesitantly, and pressed it against the cold surface. "Stand naturally," the proctor added, noticing the man's tension. "Don't be nervous. Just relax and give me your best state." The man nodded, his expression turning solemn. He focused, channeling his force into the machine. A moment later, an earth element mark flickered to life on the display. A single, faint divine rune shimmered within the mark, barely visible but definitely there. "Cultivation rank confirmed," the proctor announced. The man let out a long breath and pulled his hand back. I watched from the side, realizing the cultivation check was the easy part. Unless someone was here specifically to cause trouble, they wouldn't show up for a test they weren't sure they could pass. "The cultivation check is just a formality," someone behind me whispered. "If you haven't hit the 1-star warrior threshold, you'd be crazy to come here. They'd arrest you for wasting their time." The proctor looked at the candidate again. "Next is the combat power test. Don't be tense. If your striking power hits the 300 mark, you're officially a certified 1-star warrior. As long as you don't go into business for yourself, The government will grant you a monthly allowance of 10,000 yuan. The proctor was trying to be encouraging. In our country, being a warrior came with serious perks. However, there were strings attached. If you opened your own private martial arts hall or worked solely for personal profit, you didn't get the stipend. And if the officials found out you were just sitting around eating and waiting to die on the government's dime, they'd cut you off. Strike the power gauge with everything you've got, the proctor ordered. The man prepared himself for 3 seconds, then threw a desperate punch. Bang! The numbers on the gauge started spinning rapidly. The man stared at the screen, his face pale. The numbers slowed down and finally stopped at 283. The proctor frowned. Certification failed. No, that's impossible, the man stammered, his face turning ghostly white. I've already condensed my element mark. I'm a 1-star warrior. He probably used special drugs to force his breakthrough. Someone in the crowd whispered, shaking their head. The association won't recognize that. Those drugs have massive side effects. Your rank looks real, but your actual power is hollow. The official stipend isn't that easy to get. Next, the proctor called out. The following candidates were much more successful. Most people knew better than to try and cheat the system with drugs. Then, the proctor reached the 5th name. Lu Yun. Certification rank, 2-star warrior. The atmosphere in the room shifted. A 2-star warrior was a different breed. Those of us who had already finished our tests stayed behind to watch. It was just like people who passed their driving tests staying to watch the others struggle. Once the pressure is off, curiosity takes over. Lu Yun's cultivation check was flawless. When he stepped up to the power gauge, he threw a punch that sounded like a whip cracking. The screen flashed, 710. He passed. The crowd gasped. This meant Lu Yun was now an official 2-star warrior with a monthly allowance of 20,000 yuan. For an average person, that was a fortune. The 1-star warriors looked at him with pure envy. For many of them, reaching 2-star status might take a lifetime, if they ever made it at all. Even the proctor gave Lu Yun a respectful nod. Next, the proctor called, his voice rising slightly. Qin Chun. Certification rank, 1-star warrior. The proctor's eyes locked onto me, filled with expectation. He knew Director Su Hua didn't personally escort just anyone, let alone call them a friend. The others in the room were curious too, though some looked skeptical. They wanted to see if the director's friend was going to embarrass himself. I stayed calm. I stood up and walked to the machine with a steady gait. I didn't waste words. I simply placed my hand on the sensor. Almost instantly, a fire element mark blazed onto the screen. Cultivation rank confirmed, the proctor said, his voice unusually sharp. He actually did it, someone muttered. He looks like he's only 17 or 18. Is there even a Qin family in Rongqing? Maybe he used drugs too? A voice whispered. A genius like that usually comes from a major clan. I've never heard of a Qin Chun. Su Hua, however, was beaming. He knew I was the real deal, and seeing it confirmed only made him more certain that befriending me was the right move. I stepped up to the combat power gauge. I regulated my breathing, using the flame breathing technique to steady my core. Then, I threw a punch. Boom. The sound was like a small explosion. The room went silent as everyone stared at the display. The numbers blurred, spinning higher and higher until they finally locked in. 780. The silence lasted for 3 seconds before the room absolutely exploded. Su Hua nearly jumped out of his skin. 780? Am I seeing things? Wait, he's certifying for 1-star, right? Why is the number that high? The machine must be broken. Even the proctor looked lost. Su Hua rushed over, checking the equipment. The Martial Arts Association didn't make mistakes like this. He looked at me, his mouth hanging open. Brother Qin, this. He didn't know what to say. He had never seen someone testing for 1-star hit the power levels of a high-tier 2-star warrior. It's just my normal power, I said with a small smile. I wasn't lying. I had already absorbed fragments of wind and ice element marks. While my rank hadn't officially jumped, my base strength had increased significantly. Besides, this test only measured standard combat power. We weren't allowed to use martial arts techniques, only breathing methods. If I had used the sheep hunter's punch, my power would have soared past 1,000. But that was a master-level technique. No need to show all my cards yet. The people around me stared like I was a monster. Asterisk normal power? Nothing about this is normal. Asterisk. Proctor, I said, breaking the silence. You can announce the result now. The proctor snapped out of his shock. Chin Chun. 1-star certification. He paused, his voice trailing off as he looked back at the 780 on the screen. The proctor stood there, frozen. I could see the gears turning in his head. He had suddenly realized the problem. I was certifying as a 1-star warrior, but my combat power had hit the level of a 2-star. If he just gave me the 1-star rank, I'd lose out on the higher subsidies and benefits. But he couldn't just hand out a 2-star rank without following the rules. He looked at Su Hua with a pleading expression. This was way above his pay grade. Su Hua glanced at me, then cleared his throat. Brother Chin, the certification process is going to take a little more time, Su Hua said. We'll have the final results by tomorrow. We'll notify you immediately. How does that sound? He was being careful. He knew my family was struggling and wanted to push for me to get the 2-star treatment, but he needed to clear it with the association president first. That works for me. Thanks, Director Su, I said. I wasn't in a rush. I turned and left, declining his offer for a ride. As I walked away, I felt the eyes of the other students boring into my back. They were the ones who had actually passed their certifications today, but standing near me, they looked like they had lost all their confidence. I was a monster they couldn't hope to understand. When I got home, I found my mother, Li Xiufan, giving my father, Qin De, a shoulder massage. They both looked up, eyes wide with confusion. Chun, why are you back? Mom asked. Shouldn't you be at the training camp? I took a leave of absence, I said, keeping it simple. Start packing the essentials. We're moving the day after tomorrow at the latest. Mom blinked, stunned. Moving? Where are we going? You'll see tomorrow, I replied. My father stayed quiet for a moment, his eyes searching mine. He saw the calm confidence there, and his expression shifted. He realized what this meant. In a city like this, there was only one reason a family like ours moved to the city center. Go on, start packing, Dad told Mom, his voice trembling slightly. He wanted to believe it. He needed to. Mom grumbled about us both being crazy, but I just smiled. I didn't have the physical certificate yet, so there was no point in explaining. Tomorrow, the proof would speak for itself. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, focusing every ounce of my willpower on the ice element. A delicate ice flower formed in my palm as I worked on condensing the element mark. My talent for ice was even higher than my talent for wind. I decided to push my ice and fire elements to the limit first. Most people looked down on dual element users because the time cost was too high. They grew arrogant, tried to level everything at once, and ended up falling behind. But I wasn't worried. I had the drive and the methods to make it work. The next morning, Mom went out to buy groceries. She ran into our neighbor, a woman who lived next door. Oh, Xiufan, why so much food today? The neighbor asked. Mom beamed, even as she tried to sound annoyed. My son is back. He's such a handful. I have to cook something special. Chen is back. A man named Zhou Yi chimed in. He was our wealthiest neighbor, the kind of guy who always wore a suit just to walk to the corner store. He had always looked down on us. I heard that training camp was for geniuses. If he's back already, he must have been kicked out. The other neighbors tried to quiet him down, knowing how much my parents had been bragging about me lately. They didn't want my dad's health to take a hit from the bad news. I'm just being realistic, Zhou Yi sneered, enjoying the moment. I have a friend whose cousin's son got into that camp last year. He was sent home on the first day. It's a blow to the ego, Xiufan. You should go home and comfort him. He was loving this. He hated that we had become the center of attention lately. Mom didn't say anything, her heart sinking as she hurried back toward our door. Right then, a loud honk echoed through the narrow street. A sleek, high-end black car was slowly crawling through the crowded alleyway. It was a vehicle that clearly didn't belong in a place like this. Who is that? Someone whispered. Look at the logo, another neighbor gasped. That's the Martial Arts Association. The crowd scrambled to get out of the way. Zhou Yi was the loudest, shouting for people to move so he wouldn't get blamed for blocking a government car. The car came to a smooth stop right in front of our house. The door opened, and a man stepped out. It was Su Hua. Zhou Yi froze and looked shocked, but things were about to get even weirder. After Su Hua stepped out of the car, he didn't just walk away. He hurried to the other side and slowly, respectfully, opened the passenger door. I watched from the window as a man in a long robe stepped out. Suhua stood to the side, bowing his head slightly. "President, this is the place," Suhua said. Zhou Yi's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. He stared at the old man in disbelief. The president of the Martial Arts Association? Why would a giant like him come to a dump like this? President Zhu Yuan looked up at our building. It was an old, 7-story walk-up with no elevator. It looked worn out and gray against the sky. "Is it here?" he asked. "Third floor," Suhua replied. Suhua had done his homework. Ever since I certified my body refining stage, he had investigated everything about my family. He knew exactly where we lived. Seeing them move toward the entrance, Zhou Yi's instincts kicked in. He saw an opportunity to rub elbows with power. He rushed forward, eager to lead the way. He wanted to show them he was a somebody in this neighborhood. But Suhua didn't even look at him. His eyes were fixed on my mother. "Ms. Li Xiofan," Suhua called out. My mom stopped. She had been watching the scene with the same confusion as everyone else, but her mind was on me. She had been trying to slip away to check on me, but now she was the center of attention. She turned around, looking puzzled. "Are you calling me?" she asked. "It really is Ms. Li," Suhua said, stepping forward quickly. He had seen her photos during the background check. "I am Suhua, and this is our president, Zhu Yuan." "Hello, Ms. Li. You can just call me Zhu Yuan," the president said. His voice was calm and kind. Mom was shaking. She had spent her whole life as a regular worker. She had never spoken to someone this important. "Hello, President Zhu. Are you here for something?" "We're here to see Qin Chun," Suhua explained. "He should be home, right?" Mom's face went pale. She remembered what Zhou had said about me being kicked out of camp. Her mind jumped to the worst-case scenario. "Is Xiao Chun in trouble?" she blurted out, her voice trembling. "He's still a kid. If he did something wrong, please, don't blame him. I'll take the responsibility. Just don't hurt him." She really thought I had committed some massive crime for the president himself to show up. Zhu Yuan and Suhua shared a look of surprise. Then, the president chuckled. "You've misunderstood, Ms. Li," Zhu Yuan said softly. "Qin Shin didn't do anything wrong. If anything, his only fault is that he's far too shocking." Mom blinked, totally lost. "It seems he hasn't told you yet," Zhu Yuan smiled. "He's a very low-key young man." He didn't explain further. Instead, he asked Mom to lead them up to our apartment. Behind them, the neighbors were buzzing. They were convinced I had caused a disaster at the training camp. "He must have messed up big time," someone whispered. "The president is here to settle the score." "Let's go listen," Zhou Yi suggested loudly. He led a group of curious neighbors up the stairs to hover outside our door. Inside the living room, I stood up as they entered. I was surprised to see Zhu Yuan in person. He didn't waste time. He pulled out a sleek, official document. "This is your certification from the association," he said, handing it to me. I opened it. The words were bold and clear. 2-star martial artist. My parents leaned in, their breaths hitching. When they saw the rank, they went dead silent. They looked at me like they were seeing a stranger. Their son wasn't just a student anymore. "Thank you, President," I said. I was actually surprised myself. I had only asked for a 1-star certification to get the leave of absence. This 2-star rank was an unexpected gift from the association. "You earned it," Zhu Yuan said, waving off the thanks. Then his expression turned serious. "Aside from the certification, I assume you want to move as soon as possible?" I nodded. The sooner the better. I knew the Zhao family would find out about Zhao Quan eventually. They would realize I was the one who killed him. With their power, they could make a family like mine vanish without a trace. I couldn't take that risk. Zhu Yuan glanced at my parents, who were still busy staring at my certificate in a daze. "I've already made arrangements for the move. As for your other troubles, you'll have to handle those yourself." He wasn't going to fight the Zhao family for me. He knew I wouldn't want him to, and as the president, he couldn't openly interfere in a private vendetta. "You've already prepared a place?" I asked, impressed. "You'll see very soon," he replied with a mysterious smile. Outside the door, the neighbors were pressing their ears against the wood. "Can you hear anything?" Joey hissed. "I heard something about a 2-star martial artist," a neighbor whispered back. 2-star? Joey scoffed. He probably offended a 2-star martial artist at camp. There's no way a kid like him is one. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed across the city. It was the official city announcement system, used only for major news. Rongqing City Announcement. Qin Shun of First High has officially certified as a 2-star martial artist. He is hereby awarded a luxury villa in Qinghe Garden, a $2 million cash prize, and a grade 4 martial arts technique. The voice rolled through the streets like thunder. Every person in the city stopped and looked up. Outside our door, the neighbors froze. Qin Shun, First High. Someone looked at the door. Isn't that him? They finally put it together. I wasn't in trouble. I was a prodigy. Who said he was kicked out? A neighbor asked, turning toward Zhou Yi. Every eye in the hallway landed on him. Zhou Yi's face went from white to a sickly green. He didn't say a word. He turned around and bolted down the stairs, his legs shaking so hard he nearly fell. The rest of the neighbors scrambled away too, terrified of being caught eavesdropping on a 2-star martial artist. Inside, my parents were shaking for a different reason. They had heard the announcement. The money, the villa, the status, it was all real. I was finally in a position to protect them. In the center of Rongqing, there were many upscale residential areas built specifically for the families of martial artists. They were high-end, but even among the elite, there was a hierarchy. Qinghe Garden was the peak of that hierarchy. The environment was unmatched, and rumors even said the security guards were all certified martial artists. "Thank you, President," I said to Zhu Yuan. He had just told me everything was arranged, and the citywide announcement followed seconds later. He had timed it perfectly. "I told you, this is what you deserve," Zhu Yuan replied with a smile. "Besides, I only informed the City Lord's office of your situation. That announcement didn't come from the Martial Arts Association." I smiled back, understanding exactly what he meant. He wasn't just being modest. The association must have told the City Lord about my friction with the Zhao family. The luxury villa wasn't just a random prize. It was a strategic move to get my family out of our old apartment and into a secure, high-status area as fast as possible. If I had to buy a place myself, it would have taken time, and a villa in Qinghe Garden wasn't something you could just buy with money alone. "There's one more thing I need to tell you," Zhu Yuan said, his expression turning serious. I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "Have you heard of the General Star Selection?" he asked. I shook my head, but my heart skipped a beat. The name alone sounded prestigious. "It seems your instructors haven't leaked it yet," Zhu Yuan explained. "The concept of a General Star is a new initiative by our country. This year, the 4 major war zones will each select one General Star. If you enter the military later, you'll receive elite cultivation and focus. You have a grudge against the Zhao family, right? Being a certified martial artist keeps your family safe, but if you want to settle things permanently, becoming a General Star is your best path." I felt a surge of interest, but I was also confused. The Zhao family had 4-star martial artists. Could a title really bridge that gap? Zhu Yuan saw my doubt and laughed. "Once you become a General Star, the military immediately grants you the rank of Major General. Of course, until you actually join the service, it's an honorary title without real command power. But with that title, there are 100 ways to deal with the Zhao family. People will be lining up to do favors for a future Major General." I understood instantly. I could wait until I was strong enough to crush the Zhaos myself, but I didn't want to wait. I wanted them gone now. "What's the process?" I asked. Zhu Yuan smiled. This was why he had come. To be a General Star, you first have to take first place in the Rongqing Talent Training Camp. Suddenly, a cold, mechanical voice rang in my head. Asterisk ding. General Star Selection Mission initiated, asterisk. Phase 1. Take first place in the Rongqing Talent Training Camp. Reward: 1 Wind Element Mark Fragment, 1 Ice Element Mark Fragment, and Volume 1 of the Star Body Refining Technique. I blinked. This felt like a freebie. With my current strength, I could probably kill guys like Yu Yang or Su Fei with a single punch. There was no real competition in Rongqing. But I knew the system. It never gave anything away for free. There had to be a catch I wasn't seeing yet. I accepted the mission anyway. After Rongqing, Zhu Yuan continued, unaware of the system in my head. You have to take first place among all camps in Jiang Province. Finally, you must be the top talent in the entire Western War Zone. You'll be fighting geniuses from dozens of provinces and hundreds of cities. Taking Rongqing is a given for you, but the Western War Zone? That will be a true challenge. We talked for a few more minutes before Zhu Yuan stood up. I won't disturb you any longer. Director Su Hua will arrange the movers. You can move into Qinghe Garden today. Chun, go see the president now, my father, Qingde said quickly. Zhu Yuan waved him off. No need. Get your things ready. He left as abruptly as he had arrived. 2 hours later, the moving trucks arrived. Just as I started helping, my phone buzzed. It was the school principal, Luo Jianwei. He wanted me at the school immediately. The prize money, both from the school and the 2 million from the city lord, had been deposited into the school's account and was ready for me. I looked at Su Hua, who was overseeing the movers. Director Su, I have to head to the school. Could you help my parents settle in at Qinghe Garden? Not a problem at all, Su Hua said, looking genuinely happy to help. A guy like him was more than willing to do favors for a rising star. Half an hour later, I walked into the principal's office. You brat, you come back and don't even say hello? Luo Jianwei barked, though he couldn't hide his pride. If it wasn't for the city announcement, I'd still think you were sweating it out at camp. I've been busy, principal, I laughed. First high is my alma mater. I was always going to come back. You just beat me to the punch. You only came back this fast because of the money, he grumbled, though he didn't mean it. Fine, give me your account number. 10 minutes later, my phone chimed. $2,250,000. 2 million was from the city. 10,000 was the standard bonus for entering the talent camp. The remaining 150,000 was from the school. I knew the school's max reward was usually 100,000. The principal must have dipped into his own pocket to give me the extra 50 grand. Don't look at me like that, the principal said, waving a hand. I'm not moved, I joked. I just thought it was a bit low. He glared at me. That 50,000 was months of his salary. The grade 4 technique will be mailed to your new home. It's a powerful skill. If you master it, you'll be a top-tier fighter even among 2-star ranks. Don't get arrogant. Plenty of geniuses burn out because they think they've already made it. I nodded, soaking in the advice. Then, I looked at him. Principal, I want to attend one more class. He looked surprised. A class? Just go to the classroom then. You haven't graduated yet, the principal said, waving a hand dismissively. You can go whenever you want. I shook my head. I want to attend one more class with my homeroom teacher. I checked the time. It wasn't her scheduled period, but I didn't care. The principal looked at me with a puzzled expression. He knew my homeroom teacher, Wang Su, had a reputation. The students called her the female Yama because of her terrifying temper and eccentric personality. I didn't bother explaining. Wang Su never had a high opinion of me, and she was definitely strange, but I respected her. She was responsible. She was the kind of teacher who treated everyone equally. She never targeted you just because your grades were bad. When my father had his accident and my family hit rock bottom, she was the one who organized a donation drive. She never pressured me about late tuition fees. If it wasn't for her, I would have dropped out months ago. Even when I spent my days sleeping in class, she never insulted me. She just kept trying to talk sense into me with a patience I didn't deserve. This was likely my last time at school. Whether I made the general star selection or not, the talent camp would lead straight into the college entrance exams. I had missed too much time already. I wanted to finish what I started. I wanted a proper end to my high school life. Go ahead, the principal said, pulling out his phone. I'll give her a call. Wang Su was a middle-aged woman, not particularly pretty and a bit stout. She almost always wore a scowl that made students tremble. But as she stepped out of her office and headed toward Class 7, a rare look of excitement flickered across her face. It was 3 p.m. and the bell had just rung, signaling the end of a period. The next one was supposed to be physical education, and students were already scrambling toward the playground. Wang Su marched into the classroom. Quiet down. The room went dead silent. The class monitor looked panicked. Teacher Wang, don't tell me the PE teacher is sick again. The school has used that excuse 1,000 times. He's the unhealthiest man on earth. You guessed right, Wang Su replied, a small smirk playing on her lips. I'm taking over this period. Get ready. A collective groan echoed through the room. Their hearts sank, but then someone noticed something odd. Wait, is Teacher Wang smiling? A student whispered. What's going on? Usually, she'd be screaming at us to shut up by now. Wang Su waited for the murmurs to die down. Her expression turned serious, but not cold. I'm not stealing your PE class for no reason. I'm doing it because someone special is joining us for this lesson. The students looked confused. A few faces lit up with realization, especially Wang Hai. He looked toward the door with pure anticipation. Wang Su didn't say another word. She just turned her head toward the hallway. A moment later, I stepped into view. The classroom exploded. One student literally jumped onto his desk. Qin Shun. Qin Shun is back. It's really him. My idol. A 2-star warrior. He just got certified. He's not even 18. He's from our class. That's my classmate. I need an autograph. I definitely need an autograph. The room was in a frenzy. When I left for the talent camp, it had been quiet, almost secret. Then the citywide announcement hit, and they realized one of their own had become a legend. They felt the reflected glory. He's back. My brother is back, Wang Hai muttered. His eyes were wide. He had wanted to call me so many times, but he was afraid of distracting me. I walked to the front of the room and looked at Wang Su. Hello, Teacher Wang. Good, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. It's good to have you back. I turned to the rest of the class. Everyone, I'm the one who asked for this class. I'm the reason you're missing PE. I hope you don't hold it against me. Of course not, the class monitor shouted. We love Teacher Wang's classes, another kid joked, drawing a laugh from the crowd. Taking a class with a 2-star warrior? This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I'm going to brag about this until I'm 80. Nobody cared about the playground anymore. They all knew, deep down, that this was the last time we would all be together. Class begins. Wang Su barked as the bell rang. In an instant, she was the cold, no-nonsense teacher again. I sat in my old seat, looking around at the familiar faces. After the exams, we would all scatter to the winds. The world is big, and unless fate intervened, many of us would never see each other again. For 45 minutes, the room was more focused than it had ever been. It wasn't because of the lecture. It was because of the moment. When the final bell rang, Wang Su looked like she didn't want to say the words. Class dismissed, she finally whispered. No one moved. They stayed in their seats, eyes filled with a heavy, lingering sadness. Wang Su pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of the whole class. She gave me one last look, then walked out of the room. Qin Shun, sign this for me. The class monitor approached me with a beautiful piece of stationery. Me too. Sign mine. Soon, I was surrounded. I think I wrote my name more times in those 10 minutes than I had in my entire life. My hand cramped, but I didn't stop. It was the happiest I'd ever been while writing. Goodbye, everyone, I said, reaching the door. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, but I could hear them all rushing to the door, watching my back until I disappeared around the corner. I made it outside the school gates when a voice called out. Qin Shun. It was Wang Hai. He was panting as he caught up. What's up? I asked with a grin. Want to go for a drink? You're getting way too fat for that, man. I quit drinking, Wang Hai said, his face unusually serious. I'm serious. That day you knocked out Liao Tao with one punch. It changed things for me. I realized I couldn't keep wasting time. I nodded, genuinely impressed. Good for you. I came to tell you something important, he continued. You know my family runs a martial arts hall. I never had the talent to cultivate, so I just played around. But yesterday, I finally met the requirements to start training. That's great news, I said. Being able to cultivate before the exams meant he could at least get into a decent university. It is, Wang Hai said, but I'm not going to college. My dad wants me to take over the martial arts hall directly. He'll coach me from behind the scenes. I nodded slowly. It made sense. Even with the ability to cultivate now, he'd only get into an average school. Taking over a family business was a solid path. Going to a regular university might not even be as good as running your own martial arts hall. Even a small hall is your own property, and every resource goes directly into your own growth. I support you, I said, patting Wang Hai on the shoulder. He beamed, clearly relieved. Really? Since you're being so supportive, why don't you let me put your name down as an honorary member of my Shanghai Martial Arts Hall? Let's be clear, though. You're rich and powerful now, so there's no salary. He gave me a sly look. I stared at him, surprised. This kid had actually set a trap for me. What do you think? Wang Hai asked nervously. He knew my future achievements would be massive. Having my name on his roster was a huge win for him. We were close, but he knew I had every right to refuse. It wasn't my responsibility to help his business. I looked at him and realized how much this meant to him. It was rare to see the fat guy so focused on something. Go ahead and list me, I said. Martial arts halls used famous names to attract customers anyway. I wouldn't actually have to do anything. Between our friendship and common sense, there was no reason to say no. You're a true brother. Wang Hai grabbed my hand. Come on, let me buy you a drink. Classes haven't let out yet. I laughed, waving him off. Next time I come to the Shanghai Hall, I'll let your dad, Wang Shanghai, treat me instead. Get back to class. Shortly after, I arrived at Qinghe Courtyard. Director Su Hua was efficient. By the time I got back, he was already gone, and the new house was fully settled. The city lord's office hadn't just given us a house. It was fully furnished with everything we needed. My parents were safe now. My next goal was to become a general star and settle the score with the Zhao family once and for all. I needed to head back to the training camp early. I had originally taken 10 days off, thinking the move would take forever, but with the city lord and the association helping, it only took 2. I stayed with my parents for 3 more days, making it a 5-day trip in total. On the morning of the 6th day, I caught a cab back to camp. Meanwhile, at the Zhao residence, a body lay in the center of the main hall. It was Zhao Quan, the boy I had killed with a single punch days ago. Wanshi, you have to avenge our son, a woman cried, her face stained with tears as she stared at the corpse. Did you find him? Zhao Wanshi asked a subordinate, his voice cold as ice. We did, master, the man replied. Surveillance shows young Master Quan's last appearance was at the Energy Mall. He left in a car with a woman and a teenage boy. He paused, then continued. The woman is dead, but the boy is still alive. Who is he? Another young man in the hall demanded. The subordinate bowed deeply. His name is Qin Shun. Zhao Liang and Zhao Wanshi both frowned. The name was familiar. It was the same name featured in the citywide announcement earlier that day. The dual-element user, Qin Shun? Zhao Liang's face shifted. Yes, and there's more. This Qin Shun has a history with us. The man young Master Quan had hit with a car recently. That was Qin Shun's father. The subordinate laid out the entire investigation. Zhao Wanshi and Zhao Liang looked at each other. They knew about the car accident, but they hadn't cared at the time. To them, Qin Dai was just a nobody. Now it was clear. This nobody's son had killed Zhao Quan. Zhao Liang gritted his teeth. Qin Shun was now a certified 2-star martial artist. He had the strength, and he certainly had the motive. They never expected a family they viewed as ants to produce such a genius. A genius the city lord's office was now publicly protecting. The official announcement for Qin Shun was far more prestigious than the one Zhao Quan had received. The Martial Arts Association was clearly backing him too. I don't care who he is, he has to die, the woman screamed. He and his whole family. Shut up, Zhao Wanshi snapped. He's your son too. Are you just going to let his killer walk? I never said I wouldn't kill him, Zhao Wanshi said coldly. The Zhao family didn't take losses like this. But Qin Shun was the center of attention right now. Killing him immediately was too risky. The authorities likely already knew about the grudge. If the Zhao family was linked to his death, they'd be uprooted entirely. They needed a perfect opportunity. One with 0 evidence. Dad, let me handle this, Zhao Liang volunteered. Zhao Wanshi hesitated. Zhao Liang was a 3-star martial artist, his only remaining son, and the hope of the family. If anything happened to him, the Zhao family would wither away. Don't worry, Zhao Liang said confidently. I won't do it personally, but I have a way to make sure he dies. Zhao Wanshi finally nodded. He trusted his son's judgment. Back at the Mingshan training ground, things were tightening up. Only 30 students remained. A few more had been eliminated while I was away. Everyone seemed to have reached a silent agreement not to challenge each other randomly. Instead, they were focusing on the gravity and infrared rooms. Some used the combat rooms filled with mechanical puppets. You could adjust their power levels to match your own for real-world practice. Most students thought it was a waste of points, though. They wanted to save their points for cultivation, believing real combat training could wait until university. Did you hear? Yu Yang broke through to 1 star. Someone whispered in the hall. Everyone knows that. I heard he can handle 4 times gravity now. Su Fei is making moves too, another added. He hasn't become a martial artist yet, but he's been obsessively training his movement techniques. He probably knows he can't break through yet, so he's focusing on speed. Su Fei wasn't giving up. He knew he couldn't break through to become a martial artist just yet, so he put all his effort into his movement techniques. Word around the camp was that he'd cranked the infrared room up to level 3 and was actually on the verge of clearing it. Entering this training camp changed everything for us. Back home, we all thought we were geniuses. Now, we realized the world was crawling with talent. If you didn't work yourself to the bone, you'd be left in the dust within days. Everyone was training like maniacs, especially Yu Yang and Su Fei. They were locked in a silent, bitter rivalry. Even after Yu Yang hit 1 star, he didn't relax for a second. He practically lived in the gravity room. "Hey, what's the deal with Qinshin?" someone asked suddenly. "I haven't seen him in days." The group went quiet. Ever since I walked out of that elemental room after 12 hours, I'd been a ghost. At first, everyone was baffled, but then Yu Yang broke through to 1 star and stole the spotlight. They'd almost forgotten about me. Now that my name was back on their lips, the gossip started flowing. "Who knows what he's doing?" one guy muttered. "He was a beast in the elemental room, but he's been gone so long. Do you think he's even brave enough to show his face now?" Yu Yang is a martial artist, and Su Fei is making massive leaps. They've probably already passed him. "Are you idiots?" A voice boomed from nearby. It was Zhou Lei. He'd been acting very high profile lately. A lot of people wanted to challenge him, but they held back because he was my little brother. Still, the guy was annoying. He never stopped talking about how great I was. "My boss isn't that easy to overtake," Zhou Lei sneered, walking toward the crowd. "You guys are too weak to even give him pressure. He's just waiting. He's waiting for someone, anyone, to actually catch up. Haven't you heard the saying? I'll give you time to chase me until I'm so far away you can't even see my back. That's exactly where my boss is right now." The crowd looked at him with sour expressions. They were sick of hearing his speeches. "Don't worry," Zhou Lei grinned. "My big brother will be back soon. When he is, you'd better be ready to tremble." He turned and walked away, looking cool and confident. But the moment he got back to his private room, he slumped against the door and let out a long, shaky breath. "Boss, please show up," he whispered to the empty room. "I can't hold this front much longer." He was terrified. With Yu Yang and Su Fei improving so fast, people were starting to think I'd fallen off. Zhou Lei kept talking big just to keep my reputation alive and to protect his own skin. If I fell from my pedestal, he was going down with me. Meanwhile, inside a gravity room, a young man stood shirtless. His muscles were defined and rock hard. At 1 times gravity, he moved with total ease. He bumped it up to 2 times. His punches stayed fluid, like water. At 3 times gravity, his movements hitched slightly, but he adjusted within seconds. Finally, he dialed it to 4 times gravity. His body buckled, his spine curving under the invisible weight. He could still move, but throwing a punch with full power was a struggle. "I need more time," Yu Yang muttered to himself, sweat dripping off his chin. "But I'll master this in 3 days." He stepped out of the room, and a nearby student immediately hurried over. "Yu Yang, Instructor Yang is looking for you." The student's eyes were full of awe. Yu Yang had only been a martial artist for 2 days, yet he was already tackling 4 times gravity. He was a monster among geniuses. Yu Yang nodded and headed to the command center. Over the last couple of days, both Robin and Yang Shui had checked in on him frequently, offering guidance. He could feel the shift in treatment. Now that he was a 1 star, he was being groomed for something big. He entered the office and saw the 2 instructors. "Instructor Yang, Instructor Robin." "Yu Yang, I have a task for you," Yang Shui said, cutting straight to the point. "I'll get it done," Yu Yang replied, straightening his back. Robin laughed. "Don't agree so fast. We don't necessarily expect you to complete it. We just want you to try. There are no rewards if you succeed, and no punishments if you fail." Yu Yang blinked, confused. He'd never heard of a mission like that. "You're a 1 star now," Robin continued, his expression turning serious. "You've earned the right to know. Soon, the Western Theater of Operations will be holding the General Star selection." As Robin explained the details, Yu Yang's heart began to race. The General Star. This was the pinnacle. "Instructor, is the task for me to represent Jiang Province in the selection?" he asked eagerly. To represent the province, he had to be the #1 talent of this generation. Now that he was a martial artist, he felt the spot was rightfully his. Yes, Robin smiled. In 2 weeks, we're holding a competition. We will pick the strongest student from this camp to move on to the provincial level. 2 weeks. Yu Yang's eyes flashed. That's plenty of time. By then, you'll have been in camp for a month, Robin explained. If you aren't the best by then, you never will be. So, in 15 days, we settle the rankings for the Rongqing camp. Instructor, I didn't mean 2 weeks was too short, Yu Yang said, his voice dripping with confidence. I'm already the strongest person here. 2 weeks feels too long. But it doesn't matter. In 2 weeks, I'll only be even stronger. I watched Yu Yang walk away, his back straight with newfound confidence. He probably thought the gap between us would only grow wider. He had even questioned why the competition was 2 weeks away. He felt he was already the strongest. But in my mind, those 2 weeks were a gift. It was more time for me to leave everyone else in the dust. Back in the command center, Robin turned to Yang Shui. Is this really going to work? He asked. Yu Yang's cultivation speed is currently faster than Qin Shen's. Robin realized what she was doing. He knew I had big ambitions to cultivate 2 elements at once, but he feared it would stall my progress in the fire element. Yang Shui wanted to use Yu Yang to pressure me, to force me to focus. I'm just worried this will crush Yu Yang's confidence in the end, Robin admitted. If Qin Shen actually manages to break through with his wind element in such a short time, Yu Yang won't stand a chance. Yang Shui didn't say a word. In her eyes, if a genius couldn't handle a single setback, they weren't worth training anyway. Meanwhile, at the training building, a figure dodged the final beam of light in the infrared room. The lasers vanished instantly. Congratulations. You have passed the level 3 agility test, a mechanical voice announced. Su Fei wiped the sweat from his forehead, a smug grin on his face. Level 4 was next. He walked toward the recovery area to catch his breath. In this camp, level 1 meant dodging 3 beams. Level 4 meant 15. Only 7 students in the history of the Rongqing camp had ever cleared level 3. Su Fei was now the 8th. No one had ever cleared level 4. Congrats, Brother Fei, a student shouted, rushing over to suck up to him. You've matched the record. You're a legend. It's mostly because of my wind element, Su Fei said, though he didn't look humble at all. Don't say that. Talent is part of strength, the student flattered. In the camp, people were starting to pick sides. Since they were afraid of being challenged and eliminated, they hovered around Yu Yang and Su Fei for protection. Anything big happen while I was training? Su Fei asked. Nothing much, the student replied. Just that Yu Yang was called to the command center by the instructors again. Su Fei frowned. He was jealous. The instructors had been seeing Yu Yang constantly lately. Don't worry about it, the student whispered. With your agility, even Yu Yang can't touch you. Once you break through to become a 1-star martial artist, you'll blow past him. While they were busy gossiping, I was already halfway up Mount Ming. I moved at a steady, blistering pace. My chest rose and fell in a perfect rhythm. I was alternating between my wind and ice breathing techniques with every step. The mountain air felt different now. Every breath felt like I was absorbing power. I stopped at the summit and checked my progress. My wind imprint was at 40%, and my ice imprint had hit 45%. My base combat power had reached 830. If I used my Sheep Hunter punch, I could probably blast out 1,200 points of force. I smiled to myself. Once I finished my current tasks and consumed the imprint fragments, I'd break through in both elements simultaneously. I'd be able to kill a 2-star martial artist with a single punch. It almost felt like cheating. I headed straight for the training building. I didn't bother reporting to Yang Shui yet. She'd find out I was back soon enough. I walked with light, effortless steps, my feet barely seeming to touch the ground, as if I were walking on the wind itself. The second floor was packed. People were lining up for the gravity room and the infrared room. Yu Yang is already at 4 times gravity, one student complained. I can barely move in one. He's a martial artist now, another replied. Just focus on not falling over. Suddenly, someone at the back of the line gasped. Qin Shun. The crowd went silent. They all turned to look at me, their expressions shifting between surprise and curiosity. They wondered if I had actually improved during my time away. Just then, The gravity room door hissed open. The student who was about to go in froze when he saw me. He actually stepped back, clearing the way. "Mind if I go first, guys?" I asked with a polite smile. They all nodded quickly. Even if they thought Yu Yang and Su Fei had passed me, I was still way out of their league. I stepped into the room and shut the door. It looked just like the elemental rooms, but instead of energy, the air felt heavy. I walked over to the control panel. It had buttons for different multipliers. I wasn't going to be arrogant. I needed to see how my body reacted. I reached out and pressed the button for 1x gravity. Outside, the number 1 lit up on the door's display. "How much do you think he can take?" someone whispered in the hall. "Maybe 3 times," another guessed. Instructor Yang said 3 is the limit for body refining. 5 is the limit for a 1-star martial artist. Suddenly, the number on the door flicked. 2 times already," someone shouted. The crowd went quiet. They knew how brutal the gravity room was. It didn't just pull on your muscles, it crushed your internal organs. Usually, you had to spend a long time adjusting to each level. I didn't plan on waiting. I knew I had to be careful. Increasing the gravity too fast can cause internal bleeding or snap your bones like dry twigs. But as I stood there, I realized the 1 times gravity felt like nothing. My body adapted almost instantly. It meant my physical foundation was even stronger than I thought. I didn't waste time. I reached out and hit the button for 2 times gravity. Outside, the crowd was already buzzing. 2 times already," someone shouted. They knew the gravity room was brutal. It doesn't just pull on your muscles, it tries to crush your organs. Usually, you have to wait and breathe through the transition. I didn't plan on waiting. "How long will he need to adapt to 2 times?" a student asked. Before he could even finish his sentence, a gasp cut him off. "It's at 3. The display on the door flickered. 3 times gravity. The onlookers were losing their minds. It wasn't just the number, it was the speed. Most people take 10 minutes just to stabilize. I was moving through levels in seconds. 4. It's at 4. The hallway went dead silent. Everyone was terrified for me. They thought I'd gone insane. Back when Zhou hit his limit, he almost collapsed trying to push his luck. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps and shouting outside. "Move! Get out of the way!" It was Zhou. He pushed through the crowd until he reached the front. I heard my big brother was back. 4 times? That's nothing. He can hit 6. No, 7. He originally wanted to say 6, but he changed it to 7 last second, terrified of being proven wrong again. The other students ignored him. Someone was already on their phone, calling Yu Yang. They didn't care about Zhou bragging. They just knew a record was about to be broken. Gravity isn't like the elemental rooms. In the heat room, the temperature rises slowly. Here, each level hits you like a physical hammer. It's the ultimate test of a cultivator's body. Across the training grounds, Yu Yang was resting near the instructor's office. He had 2 lackeys with him, talking about the upcoming genius selection. "Brother Yu, you're number 1 in the camp now," one of them said. "You'll cruise through the provincial trials." Yu Yang shook his head. "The province is easy. It's the Western War Zone finals that worry me. There are too many monsters in this country." He stood up, feeling recovered. He wanted to head back to the gravity room to sharpen his edge. He hated using room number 2. In his mind, he belonged in room 1. His phone buzzed. "Speak," he said coldly. "Brother Yu, something's happening. Get to the gravity room now." The voice on the other end scrambled. Yu Yang frowned. "Is the equipment broken?" There was only 1 gravity room in the whole facility. If it went down, his training would stall. "No, it's Jinshen. He's inside, and he's already at 4 times gravity." Yu Yang's face went pale. He hung up without a word and started walking fast. Then he started jogging. By the time he reached the main building, he was in a full-blown sprint. His 2 followers exchanged a worried look and ran after him. Inside the room, I stood perfectly straight. My muscles were coiled like springs. I started throwing punches, testing the air. 4 times gravity was officially past the limit of a standard body refining peak. I could feel the weight pressing on my skin, but my internal organs were holding firm. I had adapted. I shook my head. This wasn't enough. I reached out and pressed 5. Boom. A massive wave of pressure slammed into me. My body buckled for a split second, my back curving under the invisible weight. I took a breath, gritted my teeth, and forced myself to stand tall again. I lifted my hand. I took a step. Then, I started a slow, deliberate punch routine. Outside, the display changed from 4 to 5. People were jumping back in shock. Instructor Yang said 5 times is the limit for a 1-star martial artist who hasn't practiced body tempering arts, someone whispered. How is he doing this? Did he break through to the martial artist rank too? He must have, another replied. But even then, he just reached it. He shouldn't be at the limit already. Yu Yang arrived just in time to see that 5 glowing on the door. His heart sank. He had convinced himself that by breaking through to the martial artist rank, he had finally surpassed me. Now he felt like a joke. Maybe he's just pinned to the floor, a student suggested hopefully. The alarm only goes off if he passes out. He probably turned it up and got crushed instantly. He can't actually move in there. Yu Yang felt a spark of hope. Right, that has to be it. I can turn it to 5 too, but I'd be stuck. He's not stronger than me. He's just reckless. 6. It's at 6. A trembling voice shattered Yu Yang's delusion. The number on the door shifted. If I could change the setting, it meant I was still conscious and mobile. I wasn't pinned. I was training. Is he even human? Someone muttered. Zhou Lei let out a massive, arrogant laugh. I told you, when my boss shows up, he makes the world tremble. 6 times. Are you losers convinced yet? Several students looked like they wanted to punch Zhou Lei's teeth in, but they were too stunned by the door to move. Inside, I felt like a mountain was resting on my shoulders. My heart was thumping against my ribs, and my lungs felt like they were being squeezed by iron bands. Every inch of my insides was under thousands of pounds of pressure. I slowly raised my fist. It was hard, but I could still move. This still wasn't my limit. I knew I couldn't stop at 6. I had to push further, to adapt, and to find my true limit. Time ticked away slowly. I kept moving inside the chamber, forcing my leaden limbs to throw punches against the crushing air. As the pressure mounted, something strange happened. My 3 breathing techniques began to circulate simultaneously, perfectly in sync. Every breath I took sounded like a bellows in the silent room. I could feel the ice and wind element imprints inside me condensing at an incredible speed. It was as if the gravity itself was physically shoving me forward. Even the second divine pattern on my fire element imprint was rapidly taking shape. I realized then why Yu Yang had managed to break through to a 1-star martial artist. This gravity room was a cheat code. I had thought it was just for hardening the body, but it was fueling my cultivation too. The acceleration eventually started to taper off as my body adjusted. After an hour, I could move with less struggle. The pressure felt manageable. I looked at the button labeled 7. I hesitated for 2 seconds, then I slammed my hand down on it. Outside the room, the crowd had grown massive. Every student in the training camp was there, and even the ground floor staff had come up to watch. They stared at the 6 on the door in total silence. To endure 6 times gravity for an hour was something only a 2-star martial artist could dream of doing. Oldley stared at the monitor, his mind blank. He didn't want to believe I was a 2-star martial artist. A 17-year-old at that level would be famous across the country. But the evidence was right in front of him. Yu Yang stood in the back, trembling. His newfound confidence as a 1-star martial artist wasn't just shaken, it was disintegrating. 7. It's at 7, someone screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the door. The crowd gasped. The air felt sucked out of the hallway. If I could turn it to 7, it meant I was still conscious. I was still moving. Yu Yang stumbled back, his face ghostly white. He knew he was beaten. If he stepped into 7 times gravity, he'd be crushed into a pulp instantly. Inside, I wasn't standing. I was pinned to the floor. 7 times gravity was a nightmare. I couldn't move a muscle except for my fingers. Luckily, I had kept my hand right over the control panel when I pressed the button. My finger was hovering over the off switch. My body was numb, but I felt my internal imprints surging again. I decided to hold on for 1 more minute. Any longer, and I felt like my internal organs would be ground into paste. When the 60 seconds were up, I flicked the switch. The weight vanished. I felt like I was floating. I checked my progress and grinned. My wind element was at 45%, ice was at 52%, and my fire element's second pattern had reached 5%. At this rate, I'd be a monster by the time the general selection started. He's coming out. The numbers on the door vanished. The students scrambled back, creating a wide path. The door hissed open. I stepped out, drenched in sweat and looking like I'd crawled through a swamp. But nobody laughed. They looked at me with genuine awe. "Boss here." Jolie ran over and handed me a towel. I took it and nodded. "Good job." Jolie beamed, turning to the crowd with a smug look. "I told you guys he'd hit 7. You didn't believe me, but my boss is built different." The other students glared at him, but they couldn't argue. Who would have believed 7 times gravity was possible for a student? I didn't stay to chat. I wiped my face and started walking toward the other end of the hallway. "He's going to the infrared room," someone shouted. The crowd surged after me, eager to see if my agility matched my strength. Only Yu Yang stayed behind. He watched my back, his expression twisting. He told himself I probably couldn't handle 7 times gravity for long. He told himself he still had a chance to catch up. He turned and walked into the gravity room I had just vacated, desperate to reclaim his pride. I stepped into the infrared room. It was similar to the gravity chamber, but the walls were lined with emitters. I didn't waste time. I hit the level 1 button. 3 red beams shot out instantly. I moved fluidly, dodging them as they swept across the room. Level 1 was easy. I was already a martial artist. My reflexes were far beyond this. I danced through the beams and hit the button for level 2. 6 beams crisscrossed the room in a deadly web. I leaped, twisted, and stayed airborne to avoid the sweepers. Level 2 passed. A mechanical voice announced after 3 minutes. I walked over to the level 3 button and pressed it without a second thought. Outside, the crowd saw the number change from 2 to 3. The atmosphere grew tense. Level 3 was Su Fei's record. If I passed this, I would be the undisputed king of the camp. Su Fei stood in the crowd, his face darkening. This room was his territory. He watched the door, praying I would trip. But deep down, he knew the same thing everyone else did. I wasn't just playing the game anymore, I was breaking it. Su Fei stood outside, his eyes glued to the digital display on the door. He was tense, his knuckles white. Time crawled by, 3 minutes felt like an eternity. Then, the number 3 flickered and transformed into a 4. A wave of shock hit him. His mind went blank. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He was a wind element user, built for speed and agility. I was a fire element user. By all logic, he should have had the advantage. He knew exactly what that level meant. Level 3 was the peak of basic footwork. To pass level 4, you had to reach the micro level of mastery. In the world of martial arts, techniques are ranked by your level of control: basic, micro, and perfect. Moving from one to the next is a grueling process that takes years. Su Fei couldn't understand how I had closed that gap so quickly. Inside the room, the moment I activated level 4, 15 red beams lashed out at once. They nearly caught me immediately. I didn't hold back. I activated my wind-breathing technique, feeling my body become light and responsive. I was dancing on the edge of failure. Every movement had to be precise. Level 4 wasn't just about more beams. They were faster, their patterns more erratic. I finally understood why Su Fei had been stuck. Even with my current strength, I was struggling. One wrong step, and it was over. But as the pressure mounted and my focus sharpened, something strange happened. My wind element imprint started to pulse. It began to condense rapidly. 41%, 42%. Suddenly, something clicked. My body moved without me telling it to. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was flowing. I could sense the trajectory of every beam before it even moved. I had done it. I had reached the micro level of footwork. My wind imprint surged, hitting 50% and instantly overtaking my ice element. It was incredible. The infrared room was actually better for my wind cultivation than the gravity chamber. But once I hit that micro level, the pressure from level 4 vanished. The beams felt slow. The growth of my imprint started to stall. I looked at the button for level 5. This was the ultimate test of the micro level. Most people couldn't even dream of passing it, but I had to try. I slammed my hand down on the button. 30 red lines erupted from the walls instantly. My eyes widened. It was a chaotic web of light. Outside, the crowd gasped as the number 5 lit up. The silence was heavy. People were starting to look at the door with genuine fear. First the gravity room, now this. They were starting to wonder if I was even human. Su Fei's face went pale. He knew he was beaten. Even if he broke through to become a martial artist tomorrow, He wouldn't be able to clear level 4 without months of dedicated practice. And by then, I'd be miles ahead of him. There was no catching up. Inside, I was pushing my absolute limit. Sweat poured down my face, stinging my eyes. The beams were a blur. My wind imprint reached 52%, but I could feel my stamina flagging. I couldn't clear the full duration of level 5 yet. I refused to let the machine beat me, though. I timed my movements, weaving through a final cluster of beams, and lunged for the control panel. I hit the stop button just as a red line grazed my sleeve. The door hissed open. I stepped out, wiping sweat from my forehead, and stopped dead. Nobody was talking. The entire hallway was dead silent. They were all staring at me like I was a monster from the wilderness. Jolet was the first to break the silence. He laughed, looking at me with total worship. He'd already decided I was invincible, so level 5 just seemed like another Tuesday to him. Sufei walked up to me and held out his hand. He looked exhausted just from watching. He told me he was impressed, and he meant it. He hadn't felt this way when Yu Yang broke through to become a martial artist. But with me, he had no choice but to admit he was outclassed. I shook his hand and smiled. He told me I was the greatest genius he'd ever seen, but he promised he wouldn't stop chasing me. He didn't look discouraged, he looked motivated. I liked that. I patted his shoulder, told him to keep it up, and headed for the stairs. The rules said we could only use the specialized rooms once a day to prevent injuries. I was done for now, but as I reached the exit, Sufei called out to me. He asked the question everyone was dying to know. He asked if I was already a martial artist. I stopped and looked back over my shoulder. I told them the truth. I told them I had been a martial artist for a while. I even mentioned that I'd already gone down to the city to get my certification. I was officially a 2-star martial artist. The shockwave of that reveal was visible. They thought I was just a peak stage student. A 2-star rank was something they hadn't even considered. Up in the command center, Luo Bin was staring at a fresh report. He couldn't believe his eyes. 7 times gravity, micro-level footwork, and a 2-star certification with a combat power of 780. That was higher than most veteran 2-star fighters. He asked Yang Shui if they should just name me the winner of the general star selection right now. Yang Shui shook her head. She wanted to stick to the plan. She had already ordered a shipment of mutated beasts to be brought to the camp. She wanted to see how I handled a real fight. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the camp changed. My performance had lit a fire under everyone. They stopped acting like pampered geniuses and started training like their lives depended on it. As for me, I kept at it every single day. The gravity and the infrared beams didn't give me the same massive jumps in progress as before, but I was getting stronger, faster, and more comfortable in my own skin. In Rest Area 2, Yu Yang was training so hard, he was practically screaming. He was desperate. But while he was fighting to stay relevant, I was already looking toward the next challenge. The beasts were coming, and I was ready. Yu Yang was pushing his limits. He could stand steady under 5 times gravity now, but moving freely was still impossible. The more he trained, the more he realized how terrifying I actually was. He had just finished a recovery session and was about to head out for more training when his phone buzzed. He frowned at the caller ID, but picked it up anyway. "Brother Yu Yang, congrats on becoming a martial artist," a voice said immediately. "Zhao Yang," Yu Yang replied, cutting the small talk. "Just say what you want. I need to get back to training." He had no patience for fake pleasantries. "Fine, I won't beat around the bush," Zhao Yang said. "When does your training camp end? This is very important to me." Yu Yang didn't think much of it. "I'm not sure exactly when it ends, but there's a major assessment in 3 days. After that, we should be finishing up soon." "Good," Zhao Liang's voice dropped. "There's a guy in your camp named Qin Shen, right? I need a favor. During the assessment, find a way to kill him. I'll pay you well. And don't worry, if anyone finds out, I'll use the Zhao family's influence to make sure you stay out of trouble." Yu Yang's face went pale. He took a deep breath to steady himself. "Zhao Yang, I'm sorry. I can't help you with that." He rejected him instantly. It wasn't just because he knew he wasn't my match. Even if he could kill me, he wouldn't. Zhao Yang's promises of protection were garbage. If things went south, nobody but Yu Yang's own family would care if he lived or died. The phone went silent for a moment. "Yu Yang," Zhao Yang finally said, "I know Qin Shen certified as a 2-star martial artist recently. Right now, He's the only one standing in your way. If he's dead, you're number one. Zhao Liang had been spying on the camp. He knew about the rivalry. He thought he could tempt a genius who hated being second. Let me be clear, Yu Yang countered. Qin Shun is my rival, not my enemy. We compete, but there's no hatred. I don't know what your grudge is, and I don't care. I won't do it. Yu Yang. Zhao Liang's voice turned ice cold. If you refuse, the Yu family will lose every bit of business we have with the Zhao family. That's a price you can't afford to pay. Yu Yang stared at the phone, his expression grim. Without another word, he hung up. He immediately dialed a different number. Dad. He explained everything to his father. There was a pause on the other end. Xiaoyang, just focus on your training, his father said. The Yu family won't starve to death just because we stopped working with the Zhaos. Dad, the Zhaos are definitely going to move against Qin Shun. If something happens to him, they might come for us next. Be careful. Yu Yang knew exactly how the Zhao family operated. After hanging up, he looked at my contact info. He hesitated, then typed out a warning message and sent it before heading out. Inside Rest Area 1, I looked at my phone. My expression shifted. I knew the Zhao family would try something, but I didn't expect them to be bold enough to try and hit me inside the training camp. They were truly desperate. Back at the Zhao estate, a lackey saw the look on Zhao Liang's face. Young master, he refused? He was shocked. The Yu family relied heavily on the Zhaos. Cutting ties would be a disaster for them. Stop all cooperation with the Yu family, Zhao Liang said calmly. And find someone to keep Yu Yang's father, Yu Liang, under control. We'll deal with him after Qin Shun is gone. Also, find out exactly how the camp's assessment will be structured. The lackey nodded. But sir, if Yu Yang won't do it, who will? It's hard to find someone now. The Martial Arts Association and the city governor are watching Qin Shun. Plus, he's a 2-star martial artist. Doing this during the assessment is high risk. I'll do it myself, Zhao Liang said. If he couldn't trust an outsider, he'd finish it with his own hands. But what if Yu Yang warned him? The lackey asked. If Qin Shun is prepared, you could get into trouble. What are you worried about? Zhao Liang replied. I'll watch for an opening. If I can't kill him this time, there's always next time. I'm not going to be reckless. And remember, if I do make my move, I'll try to take out Yu Yang too. We can't leave witnesses. He wasn't sure if Yu Yang had recorded their call. If he killed me and Yu Yang tried to blackmail him, it would be a mess. He decided that if the opportunity arose, he'd wipe out the whole Yu family to leave no loose ends. 3 days later, the atmosphere at the Mingshan training grounds was electric. The 25 remaining students stood in the plaza. In front of us were dozens of heavy iron cages. Inside were mutated beasts of all kinds. 2 of them were genuine level 1 monsters. The rest were body refining tier, mostly early and mid-stage, with about 10 late-stage beasts and 5 at the peak. Yang Shui and Luo Bin stood by the cages, looking at us with grim expressions. Listen up, Luo Bin shouted. Today is your first major collective assessment. The goal is simple. Find the best among you to represent us in the General Star Selection. Everyone stayed quiet. We'd heard about the General Star Selection, but most of the students knew they didn't stand a chance against the top tiers. Luo Bin noticed the lack of excitement. I know what you're thinking. You think this is only for the elites. But this assessment affects all of you. Look at these cages. He pointed to the snarling beasts. These creatures will be released into the Mingshan forest. You will all enter that forest and stay there until tomorrow. Take this seriously, or you will die. He spat out the word die with heavy emphasis. The color drained from several students' faces. This wasn't a test anymore. It was a survival game. If you can kill a beast, do it, Luo Bin continued. This is your chance for real combat before university. This experience will put you ahead of 99% of other students. But don't be stupid. If you're outmatched, running isn't cowardice, it's survival. Head for the peaks or run back down the mountain if you have to. Luo Bin's voice boomed across the clearing, snapping everyone to attention. He explained that soldiers were already stationed around the base of the mountain. Their job was to keep the beasts from escaping and harming civilians. If we encountered something we couldn't handle, we could run to them for help. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The students who had been joking around suddenly looked grim. This wasn't a game anymore. It was real. One more thing, Luo Bin added, his eyes scanning our faces. Aside from the top prize, everyone will receive rewards based on their individual performance. So give it your all. Good luck, boys. At his signal, dozens of soldiers in camouflage stepped forward. They hoisted the heavy iron cages and carried them toward the edge of the plateau. One by one, the latches were thrown open. The beasts didn't hesitate. Sensing the danger from the powerful cultivators on the peak, they bolted straight down into the dense forest, vanishing into the greenery. Luo Bin checked his watch. He waited exactly 1 minute. Then he looked up. Go. We scattered. I moved toward the edge of the mountain and descended into the thick brush, the shadows of the trees swallowing me whole. Back in the command center, Yang Shui and Luo Bin stood before a massive wall of monitors. Every beast they had released carried a tiny camera embedded in its body. But these weren't just cameras, they were high-yield explosives. Luo Bin had warned us we might die, but the military wasn't reckless. If a student was about to be killed, they would trigger the blast, sacrificing the beast to save the talent. These kids were the future. They could be scarred, but they needed to live long enough to reach the real battlefield. Boss, I'm begging you. Let me follow you. I sighed, not even turning around. Jolie was trailing behind me like a lost puppy. I'll be your assistant. I'll do whatever you need. No, I said, keeping my eyes on the shifting shadows of the Mingshan forest. The mountain was big, but not infinite. With only a few dozen beasts released, finding one wasn't actually that easy. If you were lucky, you might spend the next 24 hours without seeing a single monster. But if you were unlucky enough to stumble onto one of the 2 level 1 beasts, you were dead. Only Yu Yang and I stood a real chance against those. Even a top student like Su Fei would have to run for his life. Come on, boss. I'm useful. Zhou Lei persisted. We're out here for a full day? I can talk to you at night. Keep watch while you sleep. It'll be great. I stopped and turned to face him. Following me is dangerous. Zhou Lei blinked. He clearly didn't believe me. In his eyes, I was the safest person on the mountain. I don't care about danger. I'm your little brother. If I run away because things get tough, I'd have no loyalty left. Fine. Do what you want, I said, turning back to the trail. Zhou Lei grinned and hurried to catch up. As we walked, my mind wasn't on the beasts. I was thinking about Zhao Yang. I wondered if he had hired someone or if he was bold enough to come himself. I had to be ready for the Zhao family to strike. If Zhao Yang showed up, he would be a threat, but that was all. My cultivation had surged. My wind element mark was at 80%, ice was at 82%, and I had already started on the second divine vein of my fire system. My combat power sat at 1100. Combined with my blazing sun punch, even a 3-star martial artist like Zhao Liang couldn't kill me easily. If he failed to kill me instantly, I would lead him straight to Yang Shui or Luo Bin. The Zhao family was powerful, but they wouldn't dare breathe a word if the military executed their son for interfering with an official assessment. Suddenly, the bushes ahead rustled violently. A creature leaped out, blocking our path. It stared at us with predatory hunger. A blood wolf, Zhou Lei gasped. We had studied these in class. They were known for their speed, covered in long, crimson fur that looked like dried gore. This one was at the mid-stage of body refining. Boss, let me handle this, Zhou Lei said, stepping forward. He wanted to prove his worth. I nodded. Zhou Lei had reached the late stage of body refining recently. He should be able to handle it. He charged in, looking fierce, but the moment the wolf let out a guttural roar and lunged, Zhou Lei let out a high-pitched yelp. He dove behind a thick tree, using the trunk as a shield. He fought like a coward, darting out for quick pokes and then retreating immediately. I watched him for a while, realizing the kid wasn't just scared, he was incredibly cautious. Even when he had a 90% chance to land a finishing blow, he would back off and wait for 100% certainty. It took him 30 minutes to kill a beast he clearly outranked. Boss, how did I do? Zhou Lei asked, panting as he dragged the wolf's carcass toward me. Not bad, I said. A bit pathetic, but not bad. Pathetic? He looked confused. You had a 90% chance to end it 10 minutes ago. Why didn't you? Boss, a 90% chance is basically the same as suicide, he said with total sincerity. I looked at him, realizing he actually believed that. I patted his shoulder. Keep that mindset. It'll keep you alive. He checked the wolf's head for a beast core, but his face fell when he found nothing. We left the carcass behind and kept moving. What we didn't know was that halfway up the mountain, tucked away in a hidden crevice, was a small, camouflaged tent. Zhao Liang was inside. He had been there for a day and a night, slipping onto the mountain before the military guards had set up their perimeter. A stray beast suddenly lunged into his tent, snarling. Without even looking up, Zhao Liang threw a punch. There was a wet thud, and the beast's head exploded into a red mist. "So, the assessment has started," he muttered. He pulled a laptop from his bag. The screen flickered to life, showing dozens of grainy camera feeds. He had spent the last 10 hours planting wireless hidden cameras all over the mountain. The resolution was poor, but it was enough. He sat there, motionless, watching the feeds with the patience of a spider. He saw other students pass by, but he didn't move. He didn't care about them. He didn't even care about Yu Yang yet. His eyes were fixed on the screen, waiting for one specific face. Finally, after hours of silence, two figures walked into the frame of a camera near the lower valley. Zhao Liang's lips curled into a cold, deadly smile. I had finally walked into his trap. Zhao Liang stared at the screen. There I was, walking through the valley. He completely ignored Zhou Lei, his eyes locked onto me with predatory focus. He didn't rush. He studied the terrain, matching the grainy footage to the mental map of the cameras he'd planted. Then, he let out a cold, surprised laugh. I was less than a kilometer away. Better yet, I was walking straight toward him. He wasn't sure if it was his luck or my death wish. He snapped his laptop shut, stepped out of the tent, and headed into the brush. Meanwhile, Zhou Lei and I had stopped to catch our breath. A low-level beast lay dead at our feet. Zhou Lei sliced open its skull and pulled out a small beast core. He cleaned it off and held it out to me. I just shook my head. A basic core like that was useless to me now. He grinned and tucked it into his pocket. Suddenly, the forest groaned. A massive tree ahead of us shuddered and crashed to the ground. A beast with fiery red fur stepped into the clearing, its eyes burning with pure malice. It was a fire cloud tiger. As it stepped on the dry leaves, they began to smolder and ignite under its paws. Zhou Lei's face went white. This was a level 1 fire beast, one of the 2 strongest monsters in the entire assessment area. Zhou Lei tried to act brave. He told me he wanted to take it on himself, as long as I promised to jump in if things got ugly. But the second the tiger lunged, his courage vanished. He screamed and dove behind me. I didn't move until the beast was midair. I threw a single, straight punch. The impact sounded like a cannon blast. The tiger's massive body was sent flying backward, snapping another tree before hitting the dirt. It didn't twitch again. Back at the command center, the instructors were stunned. Robin watched the feed, shaking his head. To me, this assessment was a joke. Yang Shui stared at the screen, calculating my power. She estimated my combat strength was already over 1,000. That was impossible for a student, yet there I was, shattering the limits of a 2-element cultivator. Then, Yang Shui's expression shifted. She saw a face on the monitor. It was a stranger approaching the tiger's carcass. Robin leaned in, his brow furrowed. The man wasn't a student or staff. They ran a facial recognition scan, and 2 seconds later, a name popped up, Zhao Yang. Robin turned pale. The Zhao family was insane. They knew about the grudge, but they never expected them to sneak an assassin into a military-monitored training ground. If I died here, the Zhao family was finished, but that didn't matter if I was already dead. Yang Shui's voice turned to ice. She ordered Robin to go kill him immediately. Robin didn't wait. He burst through the command center doors, shattering the frame as he sprinted toward the mountain. Back in the woods, Zhao Yang stepped into the clearing. Zhou Lei jumped, his heart nearly stopping. He could feel the killing intent radiating off this man. Zhao Yang didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes on me. He noted the dead tiger and told me he was now certain I was the one who killed Zhao Quan. I stayed calm. I asked him if he had any evidence. He shook his head. He told me evidence didn't matter. The Zhao family didn't like trouble, and they found it easier to just remove the source of it. He looked down at me like I was already a corpse. I smiled back. I asked him if his brother ever thought about this day when he hired someone to run over my father. That was all it took. Zhao Liang exploded forward like a wild animal. He pulled a blade and swung it in a wide, lethal arc. I blurred to the side, feeling the wind of the blade pass my chest. The tree behind me was sliced clean through, falling with a deafening roar. Jolie scrambled away, terrified. As I dodged, I launched a counterattack. My fist whistled through the air, aimed right for his temple. Zhao Liang was fast enough to bring his blade up to block, but the force of the hit sent him skidding back across the dirt. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He realized I had been hiding my true strength. He thought my power was still at the level of my official certification. I looked at him and felt a wave of disappointment. He was a 3-star cultivator, but his foundation was shaky. I could tell just by the way he moved. He was a fraud, a trash 3-star who had used expensive drugs and supplements to force his way up the ranks. He wasn't a warrior. He was just a spoiled product of his family's wealth. And now, he was standing in my way. I knew the truth about the Zhao family. They only cared about their public image in Rongqing. His father wasn't enough to maintain their status, so the two brothers used expensive drugs to force their way into the higher ranks. To the outside world, the Zhao family looked invincible with a 4-star father and 2 genius sons. Zhao Liang gripped his blade, his face twisting with rage. He didn't care that his power came from a bottle. He just wanted me dead. He lunged again, swinging his blade with everything he had. I didn't move. I didn't even try to dodge this time. I looked him right in the eye and told him how pathetic he was. I thought he'd be a threat, but he was just a waste of space. I tightened my fist. A massive ball of fire erupted around my hand, but it wasn't a normal flame. It was colorless, shimmering with a heat so intense it made the air vibrate. From a distance, it must have looked like I was being swallowed by a miniature sun. Back in the command center, Yang Shui gasped. She had been relieved when I knocked Zhao Liang back earlier, but now her heart was in her throat. She watched the screen as I raised my fist, the light becoming so bright it washed out the camera feed. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She knew I was talented, but this level of power was terrifying. Zhao Liang's blade came screaming down toward my head. He was screaming, too, until my fist moved. The light blinded him instantly. A sickening crack echoed through the woods as his high-grade blade shattered into 1,000 pieces. My fist didn't stop. It slammed directly into his chest. The force was incredible. I felt his ribs cave in and heard his heart rupture under the pressure of the flames. His eyes bulged, his face went ghost white, and he was launched backward like he'd been hit by a truck. He smashed through several trees before finally hitting the ground, a broken heap of meat and bone. I walked toward him slowly. A trash 3-star is still trash. You can eat all the pills in the world, but you'll never reach the level of a real warrior. Zhao Liang looked up at me, coughing blood, unable to process how he had been defeated in a single strike. He didn't even look sad about his brother anymore. He was just filled with a bitter, pathetic jealousy. He couldn't understand how a kid with no background and no money could be stronger than him. I knelt beside him. He tried to speak, but his internal organs were pure mush. No sound came out. I told him I'd do him a favor and end his misery. I raised my palm to finish it. Qin Chun, stop. Don't kill him. A voice shouted from the trees, but I didn't hesitate. My palm came down. One hard strike, and Zhao Liang was gone. The second stage of my journey had begun. Back in the command room, Yang Shui was frozen, staring at the screen in total shock. I turned around and saw Instructor Luo Bin emerging from the brush. I gave him a calm smile and thanked him for coming so fast. Luo Bin looked at the corpse, then back at me. I could tell his mind was racing. He had seen me kill a 3-star cultivator with one punch, and I hadn't even broken a sweat. He sighed and waved his hand, telling me that what's done is done. He admitted he wanted Zhao Liang alive to testify against the rest of the Zhao family, but I knew better. If you leave an enemy alive, they just find a way to come back. I wasn't interested in a trial. I wanted them gone. Luo Bin looked at me with a new kind of respect. He realized I wasn't just a talented kid, I was a predator. He told me the trial was over for me. There was no point in testing me against students when I was already killing 3-star adults. He declared me the winner of the selection right there. Suddenly, a system notification pinged in my head. I had completed the first phase of the general selection. The rewards were massive, but the new mission was even bigger. I had to become the #1 genius in the entire Jiang province. The rewards for the next phase included a soil element sensitivity pill and 3 talent strengthening pills. I was thrilled. My fire element was for offense, and my wind was for speed. If I could unlock the soil element, my defense would be unbreakable. I'd be a walking fortress. Luo Bin told me to head back to the training camp while he handled the accident with Zhao Yang. Since the guy had broken into a restricted trial zone, his death was his own fault. Nobody would come after me for it. Before I left, I walked over to the body of the fire cloud tiger I had killed earlier. I cut open its skull and found something shimmering inside, a beast essence. It was a grade 1 fire essence. My system confirmed I could consume it to strengthen my spiritual seals. I asked Luo Bin what it was worth. He looked surprised that the tiger had actually dropped one. He told me it was worth at least 500,000. My jaw nearly dropped. That was 5 times the price of a top-tier beast core. Luo Bin explained that these essences were rare and usually came from the front lines where soldiers were dying every day to protect the cities. I gripped the essence tight. My power was growing, and with the Zhao family finally on the ropes, I was ready for whatever came next. Luo Bin explained that after the government takes its cut for processing, the soldiers on the front lines only get a fraction of the profit. Even though a grade 1 beast essence sells for a fortune, the warrior who risked their life for it gets less than 500,000. I nodded, absorbing the reality of this world, then told him I was heading out. I didn't want to waste another second. I hiked up toward the peak and reached my private lounge half an hour later. The moment the door clicked shut, I checked my system space. With a flick of my wrist, 2 glowing mark fragments appeared in my palm. I didn't hesitate. I swallowed them both. A notification pinged in my mind. I had successfully consumed the wind and ice fragments. Suddenly, I felt a violent surge of energy. The wind and ice elements inside me reached full completion. My body felt like it was being rebuilt from the inside out. It was a double breakthrough. I gripped my fists, feeling the raw, explosive power coursing through my veins. I wasn't just a student anymore. I was a true triple-element warrior. I turned my attention back to the system space. A mysterious manual was floating there. As I focused on it, the pages began to flip rapidly on their own, and a flood of information rushed into my brain. The manual dissolved into light as I processed the technique. The Star Body Refining Art, Volume 1. The description was simple, but the content was staggering. It treated the human body as a universe. The goal of the first volume was to forge a star body, making my physical form as indestructible as a celestial planet. In this world, Grade 9 was the absolute peak of martial arts, and this was only the first volume. I couldn't even imagine how powerful the later stages would be. This technique felt like it was made for me. Most warriors couldn't handle this kind of cultivation because their bodies would collapse under the pressure, but my multiple elements had already tempered my foundation. I was ready. Finally, I took out the fire beast essence I'd harvested from the tiger. I swallowed it and felt the energy melt into my system. I sat cross-legged, focusing on condensing my spiritual seals. The essence was incredibly potent. It pushed my fire element progress to 20% of the way toward the second seal. I checked my stats. My fire, wind, and ice levels were all at 1-star warrior rank. My total combat power had hit 2100. But then I looked at my bank balance. 500,000 for just 20% of 1 seal? I thought 2 million made me rich, but in the world of high-level cultivation, I was still a broke college kid. I spent the rest of the day and night locked in my room, practicing the star body art. By the next morning, a knock on the door pulled me out of my trance. I felt different. My skin felt denser, my muscles more efficient. After 20 hours of training, I had finally scratched the surface of the technique. A soldier was standing outside. He told me Commander Yang wanted to see me in the command center. I followed him without a word. My time at this training camp was officially over. Now, I had to prepare to face the top geniuses of the entire Jiang province. The command center was surprisingly bare. No luxury, just a desk, a few chairs, and a massive screen on the wall. Yang Shui was sitting there, looking sharp. Up close, she had a cold, refined beauty that grew on you the longer you looked. She told me to sit. Luo Bin had already confirmed I was the top-ranked student. She gave me a choice. I could stay at the camp to train for the next 3 days, or I could go home and see my parents before heading to Yang City for the final selection. I told her I'd head home. She stayed quiet for a moment, then looked me in the eye. She asked if I'd be willing to test my actual combat power before I left. She had seen my fight on the monitors, but the light from my attack had been too bright to get an accurate reading. She knew I had killed Zhao Yang, but since he was a fake, 3-star warrior boosted by drugs, she didn't know my true ceiling. I smiled and told her I wanted to hit the combat room one last time before I went down the mountain. I wanted to test myself against the mechanical puppets. Those machines ranged from basic body refining levels all the way up to 3-star warrior strength. Yang Shui didn't object, but she gave me a stern warning. She told me not to break the puppets. She joked that if I managed to scrap a 3-star machine, she'd look the other way, but anything lower was off limits. I promised her I wouldn't be that violent. She just gave me a skeptical look. After watching me disable 10 students on my first day and kill Zhao Liang without blinking, she clearly didn't believe a word I said. As I walked out of the command center, the mountain was buzzing. The other students were finally returning from their trials. Some looked exhausted, others were cheering, and many were covered in bandages. It had been a successful hunt with no casualties. Luo Bin stepped out and called for silence. He congratulated everyone on surviving their first real test and told them the final rankings would be posted tomorrow. But I wasn't looking at the rankings. I was looking toward the combat room. I needed to know exactly how strong a star body really was.